At around 7:30 p.m. on November the 1st of 2023, an unnamed woman was recorded running up to a plane that was on the runway at Canberra Airport in Australia. Alarms blared as she walked up to the stationary Qantas Link plane and seemingly tried to wave down the pilots. Unconfirmed reports indicated that she'd missed her flight but decided to try and catch it anyway by pushing past staff at the boarding gate and then leaving the terminal through an emergency exit. The clip showed the woman, who was wearing slippers and holding her phone, standing directly beneath the plane next to its front wheel. Fortunately, the pilot stopped the engine, either after spotting her or being warned about her. The flight was delayed until the woman was arrested inside the terminal, and she remained in custody as of the latest updates. Former Qantas pilot Richard de Crespigny spoke about the incident to 9 News Australia and described it as something he hadn't experienced in 45 years of flying. De Crespigny noted that it takes an extreme attitude to do what the woman had done. He also spoke about the dangers to which she'd exposed herself, including being run over, crushed by high-pressure hydraulics, or sucked into the A380's engine if she came within 26 feet or less of it. Number 7. Jeffrey Rouse. Florida man Jeffrey Rouse, aged 40, was arrested following a high-speed chase in the summer of 2020 after he'd previously been recorded threatening and spewing racial abuse at a woman in traffic. Rouse and the victim, who was identified as Mycia, were both stopped at a red light in Naples on the evening of August the 13th. Mycia recorded the man who shouted at her, "How much do you think your life matters right now?" before calling her the N-word multiple times and threatening her with mace. Seemingly oblivious to the consequences of his actions, he encouraged the victim to post the video on her social media. The clip went viral on Twitter, at which point more victims came forward to report similar encounters with Rouse. Naples resident Yaritza Gary recognized Rouse as the individual she'd seen verbally attacking an elderly black man earlier in the month. Gary told Fox 4 the guy was yelling the N-word and saying to say something, trying to do something. Watch what'll happen to you. Gary's brother reportedly tried to intervene, but Rouse called him slurs as well. ICU nurse Dominique Peterson also detailed an incident in which she and a colleague had been victims of Rouse's racially charged tirades. Rouse, who reportedly worked as a delivery driver for Grubhub, was tracked down by deputies within days of the traffic incident. He led the authorities on a 100-mile-per-hour car chase through Collier County before barricading himself in his home. He was ultimately arrested without further incident. As of the latest updates on the matter, the authorities hadn't disclosed Rouse's charges, but noted that they would likely be met with hate crime enhancements. Number 6. Caroline Werner. Brazilian model Caroline Werner went to walk her dogs on a beach in Balneário Camboriú, a coastal city in the country's south, in May of 2023. As she returned to a street parallel to the beach, Werner decided to take her shirt off, tied it around her waist, and continued walking her dogs while nude from the waist up. Local law enforcement considered it to be a violation of Article 233 of the Penal Code, which banned performing an obscene act in a public place. Photos, which were later picked up by international media outlets, would show the topless model being handcuffed by officers. The 37-year-old was taken to the station, where she was given a blouse to cover herself and detained for at least an hour. In the incident's aftermath, she alleged that her rights had been violated during the arrest, as she was handcuffed to a cell railing and repeatedly denied an opportunity to speak to her lawyer. Werner was charged with committing an obscene act for which she risked spending up to a year in jail if found guilty. The model, who also had her own bikini line, subsequently commented on what she'd perceived to be an equality issue and the violation of the country's constitution. Werner argued that equality between men and women was a constitutional stipulation that wasn't applied In practice, as women weren't free to walk shirtless in public, speaking to media outlet G1, Werner noted that she'd traveled all over the world without facing any legal issues for being topless. She stated that her treatment reflected gender conduct dictated by patriarchal, violent culture in relation to the control of female bodies. Number 5. Kevin Hughes. South Carolina man Kevin Hughes was arrested in April of 2014 after Walmart employees in Tega Cay had spotted him in the store's health and beauty section wearing nothing but a pair of black sneakers. By the time that police arrived at the scene, Hughes had moved on to the electronics section. After he was taken into custody, Hughes claimed that the last thing he remembered was being in bed at his sister's home. He claimed that he woke up naked in his truck in the Walmart parking lot and went into the store to buy some clothes. Hughes was charged with disorderly conduct and spent the night in jail. When he was interviewed by a reporter a few days later, he admitted that he'd had a problem with drugs in the past. In spite of suggesting he'd overcome his addiction, Hughes blamed his most recent run-in with the law on the fact that he'd taken methamphetamine, mistakenly believing it was ecstasy. Hughes noted, "It really made me crazy." The man had been nude in public while under the influence of illegal substances in the past. In December of 2012, he ran while only wearing his shoes, besides 2 female joggers. He then knocked on random windows asking for clothes. By the time that the police caught up with him, Hughes was wearing plaid pants with a red sweatshirt and appeared to be under the influence of unknown narcotics. Number 4. Laneisha Henderson. In December of 2023, a Florida woman was arrested for trying to burn down the birth home of Martin Luther King in Atlanta, Georgia. 26-year-old Laneisha Chantrice Henderson had initially been observed by visitors pouring an unknown liquid on the property, which was a designated historical landmark. 2 Utah tourists asked if she was watering the plants, but upon closer inspection, noticed that Henderson was actually carrying a gas can. Henderson, who was shoeless and clad in all black, ignored pleas from the tourists for her to stop and began pouring the liquid faster on the porch and the outside walls of the home. She then tried to spark a lighter, at which point the 2 Utahans intervened. One of the men, Zach Kempf, later told a local news station that the situation was a little scary for a minute because they didn't know if Henderson had any weapons on her. Multiple surveillance cameras captured the incident. 43-year-old Kempf and other visitors were successful in preventing the fire, and Henderson was immobilized until the arrival of local law enforcement by 2 off-duty NYPD officers who were visiting the area. She was arrested for second-degree attempted arson and interference with government property. The woman was identified as a Navy veteran who'd received medals for good conduct during her service. Henderson's father reported that she'd been missing for 2 days and was experiencing a mental health crisis at the time of her arson attempt. Number 3. Chrysty Lyn Wearn. In the fall of 2020, Australian woman Chrysty Lyn Wearn was jailed for a total of 12 months at Brisbane's Redcliffe Magistrates Court following a series of crimes and erratic outbursts. On December the 27th of 2019, the court heard that Wearn was arrested after she was found with a watch and jewelry that had been stolen from a vehicle. When she showed up to court for the charge of receiving tainted property on June the 9th, Wearn was seen disposing of a needle in a trash bin outside the courthouse. Shortly thereafter, Wearn lifted her top and flashed a security guard in front of the packed courtroom. She then threw the contents of her handbag on the floor and started yelling profanities. The mother of 5 was charged with public nuisance in connection to that incident. A few weeks later, on June the 25th, she failed to appear in court. 44-year-old Wearn, who already had a lengthy criminal record, eventually pleaded guilty to failing to dispose of a syringe, public nuisance, failure to appear in court, and receiving tainted property. While convicted of all 4, she was only punished for the former and latter charges, for which she was given custodial sentences of 2 and 10 months, respectively. Upon being handed the sentence, Wearn had another courtroom outburst in which she broke down in tears and yelled out, "It's not fair! which prompted her removal by bailiffs. Today's topic was requested by Hangaroog 626. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. The Whistler. In 2012, Maine man Robert Smith got in trouble with Portland police for whistling in the city's downtown. Smith's habit of whistling loudly while wandering the streets had led to him becoming a cult figure in the city. The Whistler, as he was dubbed by locals, appeared in blogs, videos, and local media. Smith's habit, however, was rather polarizing, as some found his whistling to be annoying, unwanted, and a source of ruckus. After a business filed a complaint, Smith received a summons for disorderly conduct in May of 2012, and he was arrested and jailed in July. 32-year-old Smith, however, claimed that he was just trying to make people smile. He reportedly told the police, "You can arrest me 1,000 times, and the day I walk out of this jail, I'll be whistling out the door." Smith added, "God is showing me what I'm doing is okay. He shows me every day with laughter." He ultimately pleaded guilty to the disorderly conduct charge on August the 22nd. A plea agreement was reached with the authorities stipulating that Smith was banned from standing still and whistling. He was told that as long as he kept his whistling mobile, the police wouldn't stop him. We'll line up our release about when being blinded by love goes wrong right after number 1. Stay put if you're in the mood for some more They Will Kill You content. Number 1. Nilsa Anderson. On July the 6th of 2019, a Floribama Shore star was arrested by law enforcement in St. Petersburg, Florida, for disorderly conduct and indecent exposure, as reported by TMZ. Nilsa Anderson, better known by the surname Prowant, was on a balcony and talking to a crowd below. She then encouraged them to sneak a peek as she exposed her breasts. Anderson, who was a regular on the MTV reality series, flashed her body in full view of several police officers. They consequently approached the 25-year-old, but reportedly had no intention of arresting her and told her to clear the area, as she appeared to be severely intoxicated. Law enforcement escorted Anderson to a car that would take her home, at which point she reportedly became belligerent and erratic. After getting in the back seat, she began kicking the rear driver's side window until she shattered it, knocking shards of broken glass into the streets. She was thus arrested and taken to the Pinellas County Jail. Photos of Anderson's arrest later surfaced online. The young woman spent several hours in jail prior to being released on bail. For the indecent exposure charge alone, she faced up to a year in jail and a potential fine of up to $1,000. Mother of 6, Angela Craig from Aurora, Colorado, was declared brain dead and placed on life support before passing away at the UC Health University of Colorado Hospital on March the 18th of 2023. It was the 3rd time that the woman had been hospitalized over the course of 2 weeks. She'd reportedly been complaining of vomiting, excruciating headaches, and dizziness in the days leading up to her death. Doctors couldn't figure out what had happened to Angela. Text messages to James, her husband of 23 years, indicated that the woman felt like she'd been drugged. James didn't allow for her to be given an autopsy in spite of requests from relatives desperate for answers and concerned that the illness might be genetic. He refused, claiming he didn't want doctors poking holes when she was dead. James co-owned the Summerbrook dental practice, and while he'd feigned ignorance about his wife's condition, his colleagues suspected he'd been involved. James had at one point received an Amazon package at the clinic and asked employees not to open it. On March the 13th, an office manager glanced inside and saw potassium cyanide. She searched for the symptoms that consuming it would cause and found they lined up perfectly with Angela's mysterious illness. The police were called after one of James's colleagues told a nurse at the hospital about the cyanide. The dentist failed to provide a clear explanation for why he was in possession of the lethal substance upon being questioned. On March the 16th, at his home, the police found workout-style shakers and 2 Ziploc-style bags with white powdery substances in them. Investigators believed that the dentist had been poisoning Angela's shakes with cyanide, and he was thus arrested on suspicion of murder. It was also discovered that he'd researched how to make poison, what was the fatal arsenic dosage, and whether it was detectable in an autopsy. While Angela was in the hospital, her husband thanked friends and family for their prayers, reportedly stating that it was pretty scary not having answers. A motive for the murder emerged following an examination of James's internet communication. He was having an affair with Karen Kane, a married orthodontist from Austin, Texas, whom he'd met at a conference. He'd sent the woman explicit emails of an intimate nature and was going to fly her into Denver as the mother of his children was dying in the hospital. He'd mentioned the fact that his wife was ill to his mistress. Kane sent him an email claiming that she wanted to be there for him but didn't want to meet his loved ones while pretending to be a friend when there was something more. The email was sent on March the 16th, and Angela was pronounced dead 2 days later. In spite of them having marital problems, Angela never stopped telling James that she loved him, even as he was poisoning her to death. Aside from wanting to start a new life with Kane, who'd recently divorced her husband, James's motive may have also been financial. Angela had 3 life insurances, and the dentist was reportedly hiding the fact that they were roughly $2 million in debt. It stemmed from gambling, making poor cryptocurrency investments, falling for a Ponzi scheme, and frequently flying his mistress to Colorado. The case was ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 16. Sean Armstead. On May the 8th of 2022, veteran NYPD officer Sean Armstead was supposed to work a shift in the Bronx but called in sick. The 36-year-old had spent the day tailing his wife, Alexandra Vander Hayden, aged 35, whom he suspected of cheating on him. She and her lover, 20-year-old Edward Wilkins, drove separately to a meeting spot at La Quinta Inn in Wallkill. Wilkins worked for Vander Hayden's dog walking business, and it wasn't immediately clear for how long they'd been having an affair. After spending a few hours at the hotel, they drove out and had dinner at a Golden Corral restaurant before heading to a Dave & Buster's. The entire time, Armstead was following them, and it was suspected that he'd planted a tracking device on his wife's car. Armstead was due to start his shift at midnight, and Vander Hayden reportedly figured it was safe for Wilkins to drop her off back at her car shortly before 11 p.m. They started driving to the hotel for another rendezvous in separate vehicles. Armstead then chased after his love rival on the NY211. The off-duty officer rammed his car into Wilkins's, sending it spinning out of control. Both vehicles then came to a halt, facing east in the roadway's westbound lanes. Wilkins jumped out and started running, reaching the parking lot of a Buffalo Wild Wings. Armstead fired a volley of 16 shots towards his love rival, with 11 bullets impacting him. Some of the shots struck Wilkins in the back of the head, killing him. In the immediate aftermath, Armstead was found dead from a gunshot wound as well. Updates from January of 2023 indicated that Wilkins' mother had sued the NYPD, accusing them of negligence for allowing Armstead to be in possession of his service weapon even though he'd called in sick. The suit also alleged that the shooter suffered from mental health issues and was therefore psychologically and emotionally unfit to be a police officer and to carry a firearm. Number 15. Nancy Gonzalez. New York City man Ronell Wilson was taken into custody after killing officers James Namorin and Rodney Andrews during a gun sting gone wrong in Staten Island in 2003. The undercover officers were shot in the back of the head, execution style, and Wilson was sentenced to death in 2007. The case was eventually thrown out on a legal technicality during a subsequent appeal, but Wilson was retried. In the months leading up to the second trial, Wilson was incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center, a federal jail in Brooklyn. Nancy Gonzalez was a night guard at the prison tasked with supervising him. During that time, the pair began having relations. Inmates reported to have seen them flirting and spending a lot of time together. One inmate testified that he'd spotted the guard standing near Wilson's cell. The witness noted that the latter's pants were down around his ankles when Gonzalez moved away. The illicit relationship reportedly gave Wilson power and leverage over other inmates. He and Gonzalez had relations in an activity room at the detention center and conceived a son, Justice, who was born on March 21st of 2013. The guard later admitted that she'd been trying to get pregnant, which was interpreted as her last-ditch effort to help Wilson with his case. Once the affair was discovered by officials, 29-year-old Gonzalez was arrested. She pleaded guilty to abusing a person in custody in early July of 2013 and was released on bail while awaiting her sentencing. She refused to testify at Wilson's upcoming hearings before he was given the capital punishment for the second time later that month. While out on bail and awaiting her own sentencing, Gonzalez was prohibited from consuming alcohol or drugs due to her history of substance abuse. Gonzalez met with Wilson's family twice in the summer of 2013 after the cop killer had been sentenced. The disgraced guard would claim that his relatives subtly blamed her for him getting the second death sentence and that they plied her with alcohol. Her drinking was discovered by law enforcement. In November of 2013, Gonzalez admitted in Suffolk County Family Court that she'd been with her child while intoxicated and temporarily lost custody of Justice, who was placed in the care of her maternal aunt. In February of 2014, Gonzalez was sentenced for her illicit affair with Wilson. Her defense asked for leniency, highlighting her nightmarish upbringing during which she'd been abused by multiple male family members, affecting the relationships she'd formed later on as an adult. As a further indication of emotional instability, her defense pointed to the fact that she'd had at least 8 intimate partners, men and women, during her 2 years working at the detention center. She was ultimately jailed for 1 year and 1 day. Number 14. Jessie Dobbs. On the morning of November the 6th of 2016, the bodies of 37-year-old Cynthia Morris and teenager Brianna Pavlicek were found at the former's home in Baytown, Texas. Both victims had been fatally shot, but the circumstances of the double murder remained unclear. Kirsten Fritsch, Morris's teenage daughter, and Pavlicek's older sister was missing from the home, as was her 2008 PT Cruiser. An Amber Alert was issued for the teen. Later in the day, the police found Jessie Dobbs, Fritsch's boyfriend, at a bar in Texas City outside Galveston. He'd reportedly walked in the establishment barefoot, asking for a glass of water. The 21-year-old had also called his ex-girlfriend, who was the mother of his 2 children, asking to see the kids one last time. Fritsch's car was in the bar's parking lot, but there was no sign of her. Dobbs was uncooperative upon being approached by law enforcement, and he was charged with resisting arrest. Following a search lasting 2 days, Texas EquiSearch volunteers discovered Fritsch's body in a wooded area north of the bar where Dobbs had been arrested and about 25 miles from where her mother and sister had been killed. Her body was in a state of decomposition, but it was determined she'd suffered at least 60 stab wounds. Dobbs' initial charge was changed to first-degree murder. Charging documents indicated that the man confessed to killing his girlfriend, but that his grip on reality was questionable. He was quoted as saying, "Kirsten is dead, I killed her. Not the real Kirsten, but the fake Kirsten." In an odd letter he sent to the court, the man claimed that he was falsely accused, as he knew for a fact Fritsch wasn't dead. His lawyer stated that he was suffering from delusional episodes. In 2018, Dobbs admitted in court that he'd killed Fritsch, but tried to argue that his crime had been one of sudden passion, which would have capped his sentence at 20 years. He claimed that he'd lost control and relentlessly stabbed Fritsch during an argument about Morris and Pavlicek's murders. The man claimed that Fritsch had called him an abuser and tried to pin the murder of her family members on him when she'd actually shot them. During sentencing, prosecutors argued that Dobbs had not only killed his girlfriend, but was also the primary suspect in the shooting deaths of her mother and sister, an aspect confirmed by Baytown police. Dobbs had started dating Fritsch online and had moved into her family's home a few weeks before the incident. According to Fritsch's grandmother, he seemed like a lowlife, and Morris wanted him gone. Dobbs' sudden passion claim was rejected, and he was sentenced to 45 years in prison for killing Fritsch. As of 2018, no one was charged for the deaths of Morris and Pavlicek. Should the culprit be established as Dobbs, he'd face capital punishment. Number 13. Robert Hall. Emmett Corrigan and Ashley Burke met in 2003 while they were attending Utah State University and got married in March of the following year. The couple had 5 children and settled in Meridian, Idaho. Emmett went on to start a law practice while Ashley became a stay-at-home mother. In late 2010, Emmett hired a 40-year-old paralegal named Candy to work at his practice. The woman was married to Robert Hall, with whom she had 2 children. Emmett and Candy started having an affair, and by 2011, Ashley had noticed that her husband was becoming distant, but only suspected he'd started seeing someone else. On March the 11th, the couple argued about their marital issues and Emmett stormed out, heading to a local pharmacy where he met Candy. She later reported that he'd gotten into her lover's truck and that they drove around before having intercourse in the vehicle. Candy's daughter then noticed that her mother's car was parked at the pharmacy and told Robert. He called Candy and, as per her version of events, ended up speaking with Emmett and argued over the phone. After 10 p.m., Robert went to the pharmacy and a physical altercation with Emmett ensued. Candy, the only other person present when the fight unfolded, stated that Emmett had incited her husband to fight him. She claimed to have turned around towards her car, at which point she heard 3 gunshots ring out. Emmett suffered fatal injuries while Robert had a grazing bullet wound to his head. Robert was arrested and during the trial that followed, claimed that he'd acted in self-defense, but the prosecution argued he'd waited for the couple and then shot Emmett in cold blood for having an affair with his wife. In October of 2012, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a minimum of 17 years served before he'd be eligible for parole. With her suspicions on the affair confirmed in the shooting's aftermath, Ashley spoke about her late husband, stating, "I begged him to stay home and fight for me, but instead he died fighting for someone else's wife." Number 12. Adolph Sonny Neal. 69-year-old Donald William Shedd was found dead by a family member at a home in Dalton, Georgia, on May the 24th of 2012. The authorities were called to the address where they also discovered the lifeless body of the man's granddaughter, 27-year-old Jessica Neal, in the pool house. She'd been stabbed multiple times while Shedd had been left unrecognizable after being beaten to death. He'd been living with Jessica and her husband, Adolph Sonny Neal, who became the prime suspect in the double murder. A manhunt was launched for him in the incident's wake. Sonny and Jessica worked together at the Dalton tanning salon, Dazzle, which they co-owned. By multiple accounts, the former was jealous, controlling, and obsessive in his relationship with Jessica, who was 22 years younger than him. The night before she was killed, Jessica had messaged her father to say that all hell is breaking loose, but claimed that she had a handle on the situation. While the authorities were searching for the suspect, a woman recognized Sonny upon seeing him walking along Highway 201 in Varnell. He took off running but was later found in the woods, 12 miles away from his home, where he'd been hiding since the murders. He was taken into custody without incident. As investigators delved deeper into the couple's lives, it emerged that their seemingly perfect marriage had all but disintegrated. They'd been seeing other people and had been on the verge of divorce for months. A close friend of Jessica's claimed that the woman was taunting her husband with the fact that she'd started a new relationship and was determined to divorce him. It was thus suspected that Sonny had killed her and her grandfather in a fit of jealous and possessive rage. The incident was described as one of the goriest to have ever taken place in Whitfield County. Sonny eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Number 11. Tyquan Long. By January of 2016, New York City woman Joanne Gravett, aged 36, had obtained a protection order against her boyfriend, Tyquan Long. The relationship was reported to have broken down after the latter had started abusing drugs. In September of the previous year, Long was arrested on suspicion of assault, petty larceny, and harassment after he'd reportedly thrown a sneaker at Gravett and struck her with a lamp. On January the 17th, the woman told 29-year-old Long to stay away from her, to which he replied, "I'd rather be dead or make peace with God in jail." A little over a week later, Gravett would be dead. Surveillance footage showed Long storming into his ex's apartment in Far Rockaway, Queens, on January the 27th of 2016. He re-emerged within minutes with what appeared to be a gun, and a neighbor later reported that they'd heard commotion, with the noise culminating in a loud boomed. Long had become obsessed with the idea that Gravett was seeing a man from her apartment building. She was subsequently found lying face down on the floor of her apartment with multiple gunshot injuries. Gravett passed away at St. John's Hospital a few hours later. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Long went down to the lobby where he encountered 51-year-old Barbara Romano, the mother of the man whom he suspected Gravett had been dating. Long told Romano that her son was playing games before he opened fire on her, releasing 3 to 4 shots. Romano dove behind the security desk and crawled to the boiler room from where she called the police. She suffered a gunshot injury to her hand but was taken to a local hospital and recovered. Long fled to California, and in March of 2016 was tracked down by the Regional Fugitive Task Force and arrested at the Sacramento home of the mother of his child. He faced a slew of charges that included second-degree murder, attempted murder, and assault with intent to cause serious injury with a weapon. In the spring of 2018, he was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison, which meant that he'd likely die behind bars. Number 10. Sincere Brown. Leading up to early September of 2018, teenager India Chapman from DeKalb County, Georgia, had started dating again, following her breakup with 18-year-old Sincere Brown. The pair had met at North Atlanta High School in the spring of 2017 and became romantically involved by the summer. Brown grew possessive and controlling in the relationship. He displayed erratic behavior, characterized by frequent angry outbursts followed by him immediately apologizing. Chapman eventually broke up with him, but they reportedly remained friends. Unable to move on in the separation's wake, Brown became enraged upon realizing that Chapman had started seeing someone else. Speaking of Brown's attitude towards that development, Chapman's grandmother would later state that if he couldn't have her, no one could. In early September of 2018, Brown lured his ex to his grandfather's home on Biffle Road in Stone Mountain. Brown knifed the teenager at least 8 times, killing her. He then wrapped the body in a comforter and hid it in a shed in the Stone Mountain home, where it was eventually found by another of his relatives. Brown was arrested on charges of murder and concealing the death of another, with local law enforcement describing the killing of Chapman as a crime of passion. Number 9. Kamil Ranoszek. Kamil Ranoszek was jailed for life in the fall of 2022 after he was found guilty of the brutal murder of his girlfriend, 27-year-old Iona Golabek, who was also the mother of his child. Lincoln Crown Court was told that Ranoszek had attacked the woman on November the 9th of 2021 at the apartment they shared in Boston, Lincolnshire. Golabek was reported to have wanted the relationship to end and had given Ranoszek 2 weeks to move out. The latter then found out that his girlfriend had contacted other men on Tinder and had made plans to meet one of them for drinks. In a fit of jealous rage, he struck her at least 7 times in the head with a hammer as their young child slept. Golabek suffered fatal skull fractures and brain injuries. Ranoszek then used the butchery skills he'd acquired as a chicken factory worker to disarticulate her body with a knife. He cut the woman up into 15 pieces, of which he disposed of at Witham Way Country Park. Ranoszek subsequently contacted Golabek's friends to make it seem like he was trying to find her before he eventually reported her missing to local police. As part of the investigation, law enforcement searched the couple's home where they discovered jars containing fabric, which appeared to be tinged with blood, hidden in a cupboard. By that point, Golabek's body hadn't been found. The missing persons cases became a murder investigation, with Ranoszek as the primary suspect. He was arrested on November the 20th and officially charged following the discovery of Golabek's remains in the park a few months later. Ranoszek denied murder during his trial, but a jury found him guilty after 3 days of deliberations. He was given a life sentence with a minimum of 22 years served. Number 8. James Perriello. On December the 3rd of 2013, New Hampshire man James Perriello pleaded guilty in Sullivan County Superior Court to the second-degree murder of his wife, 42-year-old Natalie. The woman was shot multiple times at their Grantham home on April the 26th of 2012. Natalie, a mother of 4, was a popular teacher at Lebanon High School who'd recently been among the finalists for the state's Teacher of the Year award. She and James had been having marital problems for several years, and their situation aggravated following the birth of their fourth child. They spent several months apart but then decided to continue living together, albeit in separate bedrooms, while working through their issues. Leading up to the spring of 2012, James had begun to suspect his wife had started seeing someone else. He spoke with co-workers at a construction site about the matter and reportedly claimed he ought to just kill her. James had begun to secretly record his wife at their home, which was how he eventually discovered that Natalie was involved in an intimate relationship with a former student who was 20 years old at the time. On April the 26th, James flew into a fit of rage while confronting her about the recording. James would later tell the court that he'd gone into the bedroom armed with the pistol because he wanted to scare Natalie. He claimed that he accidentally discharged the weapon after she reached for it. James then consecutively shot her 6 times in the head. One of the bullets lodged in a window frame above the spot where their youngest child slept. James admitted to the murder and had no visible reaction when he was subsequently sentenced to the maximum of 35 years to life in prison. Number 7. Giselle Esteban. On May the 27th of 2011, nursing student Michelle Lee disappeared from the Kaiser Permanente Medical Center in Hayward, California. The 26-year-old never returned from a break during her shift after a 4-month search. The woman's body was found in a canyon between Pleasanton and Sunol. The primary suspect in her killing was subsequently identified as Giselle Esteban, who'd once been Lee's best friend. They'd attended the same high school in San Diego before they both moved to the Bay Area. Their friendship soured when Esteban began dating Scott Marasigan, who would become the father of her child, and after she'd learned that he'd previously dated Lee. Marasigan maintained that he and the latter were never intimate and that they were just friends. Esteban had nevertheless started to grow jealous since 2005, when she found that Lee had texted Marasigan that she was pregnant and wanted to get an abortion. She regarded the message as proof that they'd been together. Esteban and Marasigan's relationship gradually broke down, fueled by the former's jealousy. In late February of 2011, she started sending her ex texts that grew increasingly antagonistic. She accused the man of choosing Lee over her family and threatened them both that they would pay for their mistake. On March the 2nd, one of the texts read that Lee had dug her own grave by being a home wrecker. On May the 29th, 2 days after Lee had gone missing, a final text from Esteban to Marasigan read, "Where's Michelle?" She became a person of interest in early June of 2011. CCTV showed her at the scene before and after Lee's disappearance. When law enforcement searched her SUV and Union City apartment, they found traces of Lee's blood. Evidence indicated that Esteban had made calls to try and learn the aspiring nurse's schedule and had searched for her home address on the internet. Moreover, signals from Esteban and Lee's phones were picked up in the same area around the time of the incident. Esteban was arrested on suspicion of murder, and a judge would later claim he had never seen a case with more compelling circumstantial evidence pointing straight at the killer. Esteban's defense ultimately acknowledged that Esteban had killed Lee, but argued for a verdict of voluntary manslaughter, stating that the defendant had been provoked by the victim and committed the killing in the heat of passion. The 28-year-old, who showed no remorse nor testified during her 3-week trial, was ultimately sentenced to 25 years to life in prison in December of 2012. Number 6. James McDonald. Sophie and James McDonald, a couple from Dawlish, England, met when they were in their 20s. They had 3 children during a marriage lasting roughly 16 years, up to their breakup in May of 2014. There were several factors behind their decision to separate, including their financial situation and the fact that Sophie had reportedly cheated on her husband multiple times. James moved into a nearby apartment, and in January of 2015, Sophie went to his address to discuss their divorce. She'd texted her mother beforehand to say that she felt wobbly about meeting him. 36-year-old Sophie failed to pick up her boys from school, and her mother reported her missing in the aftermath. James told law enforcement that he had no idea what had happened to his estranged wife after she'd left his home before he joined in the effort to find her. He even sent texts to the woman's phone inquiring about her whereabouts. Law enforcement would eventually uncover that James had brutally murdered Sophie and then hid her body. They'd reportedly argued at his apartment over the terms of the divorce, and a man attacked her. James beat her about the head and body, pulled out clumps of her hair, and stomped on her face before strangling her to death with an electric cord. He then wrapped her body in a duvet and multiple layers of plastic. James took the body down to a communal trash storage room and hid it among bin bags before he went to pick up his and Sophie's 2 young boys from primary school. He played along with the missing persons case when police came to his home to ask about the woman. James admitted that he'd killed his wife but denied murder during the early stage of his trial. He claimed to have lost control because she'd threatened to bankrupt him and forbid him from seeing his children. He also claimed that Sophie had had over 100 secret lovers during their marriage. On the 6th day of his trial, James changed his plea and admitted murdering his wife. He was jailed for life with a minimum of 17.5 years served. Number 5. Christopher Charles Koani. Christopher Charles Koani and Natalie Leini, a couple from Queensland, Australia, had been dating for 6 months leading up to March of 2013. Leini had confided in others that she was going to break up with Koani. A verbal altercation erupted between them on March the 10th at the residence in Rochdale South, during the course of which Koani locked his girlfriend in the apartment. Later on, the police were called to the address where they found 26-year-old Leini dead. She was slumped against a wall with a shotgun wound to her temple, while Koani was in a state of distress as he was crying while curled up on the floor. Leini succumbed to the wound in a hospital a short time later. Koani told officers that his girlfriend had been shot by burglars, but was charged with her murder within days. The man entered a guilty plea to manslaughter at Brisbane Supreme Court. He claimed that he never meant to kill his girlfriend and that his shotgun had discharged by accident. Crown Prosecutor Dennis Kinsella didn't accept the manslaughter plea, arguing that Koani had intended to shoot Leini, characterizing the incident as a crime of passion. Kinsella noted that there was no denying Koani had loved his girlfriend, but added that the problem was he loved her so much that not only did he take a loaded shotgun and point it at her head, he then shot her in the head. Koani was jailed for life after he was found guilty of murder and unsuccessfully appealed the sentence. He then took the matter to the High Court, where it was determined in August of 2017 that his case warranted a retrial. Koani yet again admitted manslaughter, urging the panel to acknowledge that the shotgun had a faulty mechanism. It only took a jury 2 hours to find him guilty of murder, and he was given a life sentence for the second time in early 2018. Number 4. Shahab Ahmed. On February the 17th of 2017, Kondkar Faria Elly wrote in her diary, "If I die in 2017, that cannot be a natural death. Please investigate my death." The following day, she was gruesomely murdered by her husband, Shahab Ahmed, at their home in Parramatta, Western Sydney, Australia. For nearly 2 years, Elly had been having an affair with Omar Khan, a close friend of her husband's. Ahmed had become aware of her infidelity. Khan would later admit to the extramarital relationship in court and stated that in September of 2016, he'd received a call from Ahmed telling him, "I hope you're happy. You can come over. I am leaving home." Ahmed and Elly separated for a few months but then got back together after the latter had told him that she'd ended things with Khan. On February the 18th of 2017, Ahmed demanded to see his wife's phone and found recent messages of an intimate nature from her lover. He dragged the 19-year-old around their home and reached for a knife in the kitchen. Ahmed stabbed Elly in the face repeatedly with such force that he broke the tip of the knife in her teeth. He went on to deliver over a dozen knife strikes. He smoked several cigarettes and watched the woman as she took her last breath while lying on a blood-soaked mattress. Ahmed changed his Facebook status to "The End" and called the emergency services. He calmly told the operator that he'd killed his wife and that an ambulance was not needed. He was arrested, but denied murder during a subsequent trial, claiming he'd suffered an abnormality of the mind stemming from depression. However, the prosecution would argue that Ahmed hadn't acted in the heat of the moment, but had turned his mind to punishing his wife. His internet searches indicated that he'd looked up punishments for adultery under Islamic law prior to the attack. He was found guilty of murder and jailed for 27 years with a non-parole period of 20 years and 3 months. Number 3. Philip Dafter. Philip Dafter and his future wife Diana were both born in Malawi, and after finishing their studies moved to the UK, where they met and got married. By the fall of 2022, the once promising relationship had all but disintegrated, and the couple were on the brink of divorce. On the morning of October the 7th, Diana was seen on CCTV leaving and then returning to their Northampton apartment. The 36-year-old was never seen alive again. An argument with Philip about their car getting a maintenance checkup boiled over into a row about the man's previous infidelities and a recent incident in which he'd messaged a younger woman from Malawi. The fight culminated with Philip grabbing a knife and stabbing his wife so hard that the blade broke off from the handle. Multiple cuts on Diana's fingers suggested that she tried to defend herself by putting her hands in front of the blade. She died after one of the knife strikes had pierced her heart. Philip, a former soldier in the British Army, then boarded a train to London and reportedly told the conductor he was a bad and evil man. During the train ride, he sent a WhatsApp group message that read, "Going to jail. I have killed Diana Dafter today." He was arrested at London's Euston Station and confessed the killing to British Transport Police officers before the body was found at their home. Following his arrest and during the ensuing trial, Philip admitted manslaughter but denied murder, claiming he'd killed his wife in a moment of madness. His plea was, however, rejected, and he was found guilty of murder, with his sentencing scheduled for the second half of May 2023. Number 2. James Bland. In March of 2015, UK man James Bland was jailed for 6 years for killing his wife after claiming she'd humiliated and bullied him during their marriage. In August of 2014, Carol Bland had returned to their home in Radcliffe, near Manchester, after she'd attended a rock concert with her boyfriend. An argument erupted, during the course of which James repeatedly stabbed his 62-year-old wife in the stomach as she was getting ready for bed. When police and paramedics arrived at their semi-detached house, they found the woman dead and James with critical knife wounds to his throat. Medics were able to save the man, who was subsequently charged with his wife's killing. He would later tell officers that he'd stabbed Carol because she wanted to continue living with him while also having a boyfriend. James claimed that the woman didn't want to move nor let him sell the house, adding, "She was rubbing my face in it." The couple, who'd been married for roughly 4 decades, have been having relationship problems since at least 2013. Carol started going out alone and eventually met a man at a local social club. They went to the concert together and made plans to rendezvous again at noon the following day. Her lover called the police when she'd failed to show up for their date, and he'd visited her home to find that the curtains were still up. Bland was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter after stating in court that prior to stabbing Carol, he'd heard voices in his head repeatedly saying, "Shut her up." Number 1. Shmuel Levine. On October the 26th of 2020, violence erupted in an apartment on Ocean Promenade in Rockaway Park, New York City, during an argument between 34-year-old Shmuel Levine and his girlfriend, Danielle Morano, aged 37. A neighbor reported that he'd heard a scuffle below his window. He went down to the laundry room, at which point he saw Levine coming out of the elevator. He was reportedly wearing a backpack and had a stressed look on his face. The neighbor asked if he and Morano were rearranging furniture, to which Levine replied, "I can't talk to you right now, I'm in a hurry." A short while later, the neighbor saw that ambulance workers were doing CPR on a woman outside. He recognized her as Morano, who had blood coming out of her head after she'd impacted the ground several floors down from hers. Surveillance footage showed Levine coming outside in the incident's wake. He touched his girlfriend's arm and then her forehead before calling the emergency services. She was pronounced dead at Jamaica Hospital about 6 hours later. Levine was arrested in the incident's wake. As indicated by a criminal complaint, he had accused his partner of cheating on him and asked to see her cell phone, which she refused. He admitted that he'd put her in a chokehold while trying to forcefully grab the phone. The man denied killing her, but the evidence indicated that he'd viciously beat Morano before throwing her out of the window. At the couple's home, the police found clumps of hair matching Morano's, as well as a large dent in the apartment wall and a hole in the window screen. Moreover, at least 2 of the skull fractures she'd suffered weren't consistent with a mere fall. A Queens County grand jury indicted Levine on a second-degree murder charge, and if found guilty, he faced 25 years to life in prison. Leading up to January of 2024, Shacoria Elly had been working as a barista at Harvest and Grounds inside Concourse D at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Shortly before noon, on January the 13th of 2024, she got into an argument with a co-worker about espresso shots. The dispute devolved into a brawl between Elly and 2 of her managers, which was recorded and subsequently went viral. The enraged young woman tried to force her way past the 2 men while shouting, "Give me my stuff!" She at one point grabbed a high-top chair and lifted it over her head as if she was getting to throw with, but one of the men calmly took the stool away from her. Elly then charged her other manager, who was wearing a red polo shirt, and started swinging at his face but was grabbed and thrown to the ground. Elly got up and charged him again, only to be removed by the taller worker who fruitlessly tried to talk her down. Still screaming for her stuff, she then sucker-slapped the taller worker across the face. Internet users reacting to the video would later praise the man's restraint. As her manager asked bystanders to call the police, Elly pretended to walk away. Moments later, she ran towards the counter and jumped over it, whereupon the struggle with the managers resumed. She tried to hit one of them with a metal sheet pan before she broke free and emerged from behind the counter carrying a jacket and a bag. Elly slipped and fell as she left the premises prior to the arrival of airport security and Atlanta police. Updates indicated that her employment had been terminated, but in spite of her violent behavior, she wasn't charged with any crimes. Number 6. Mycia Burden. 25-year-old Mycia Burden was found nude outside the Parisians Gentlemen's Club in Dougherty County, Georgia, in the winter of 2014. At around 1 a.m. on February the 1st, deputies came upon Burden in a state of total undress while accompanied by her friend, Maylatha Robinson. It was Burden who'd actually placed the 911 call. The woman told responding officers that she and Robinson were exotic dancers at the club and that they'd been kicked out. They'd reportedly gotten into a fight with management after they were accused of being rude to customers. Burden claimed that her bosses threw her out naked and refused to return her clothes. Dougherty County Police Lieutenant Chad Kirkpatrick spoke to other club employees who claimed that Burden had been removed while she was clothed and that she'd undressed outside in an effort to get the club in trouble. Exotic dancing was permitted in Dougherty County, but total nudity was illegal. Parisians did have a business license to operate as a nightclub as well as an alcohol license. The club's Facebook page displayed photos of women in various states of undress, and its logo was that of a scantily clad woman holding onto the Eiffel Tower as though it were a dancing pole. Parisian's owner, Ulysses James, subsequently agreed to close the club while he and the authorities reached an understanding regarding local ordinances. Burden's dispute with management and her alleged attempt to get them in trouble ultimately backfired. The woman was arrested for disorderly conduct by the officers responding to her own 911 call because she kept being belligerent and wouldn't stop yelling profanities. Number 5. Zhou and Wang. In the spring of 2021, a video of a Chinese woman attacking her boss went viral on China's Weibo social media platform, earning millions of views. The woman, only identified as Zhou, confronted her boss, who was named as Wang, for sending her lewd messages. Throughout the clip, which lasted for just over 14 minutes, Wang sat behind his desk, clutching his hands, as Zhou proceeded to strike him in the head with a mop multiple times. Some of the hits were delivered with enough force that water flew from the cleaning tool. Wang, the deputy director of the Poverty Alleviation Department of Beiling District in Heilongjiang Province, barely flinched as Zhou carried out her furious onslaught. Between barrages of mob strikes, the enraged woman paused only to shout at her boss and talk on the phone. Wang tried to apologize for the messages, claiming they were meant as a joke, but she accused him of assault. He remained composed as Zhou smashed a glass picture frame on his head and then hurled several books at his face. In a final act of rage, she picked up a water container and emptied its contents on Wang before launching the container itself at his face. Zhou filed a report with local police regarding her boss's harassing messages, and the findings of an internal investigation concluded the man had life discipline problems. As reported by Asia One, he was fired in the scandal's aftermath and was removed from his position within the country's Communist Party. Officials concluded that Zhou had a mental illness and wasn't disciplined for the attack on her boss. The incident had occurred in the midst of China's own reaction to the #MeToo movement, so Zhou's actions were arguably met with more praise than condemnation. Number 4. Ashley Perriello. In May of 2019, Oklahoma exotic dancer Ashley Perriello showed up drunk at her workplace at the Red Dog Saloon in Oklahoma City. Her boss, Holly Jones, allowed her to work and dance on stage, but 26-year-old Perriello struggled to perform properly and fell over twice. Jones consequently fired her. In the moments that followed, Perriello reached for pool balls, grabbing a purple striped number 12 and the cue ball. She launched both at Jones's head and one of them hit the woman on the bridge of her nose. Perriello then fled and responding officers found Jones with blood splattered on her tank top, in addition to cuts on her nose and considerable swelling to her face. Jones refused medical attention. The police took Perriello into custody from a convenience store nearby. While she was being driven to the Oklahoma County Jail, the dancer continued her hysterics, reportedly offering cops all of her money if they took her home instead of the detention facility. When the officers refused, she attempted to break the police vehicle's window by repeatedly banging her head against it and then kicking it. Perriello was subdued and booked on charges of assault with a dangerous weapon as well as assault and battery. Number 3. Naomi Wheeler. In April of 2018, British woman Naomi Wheeler started working as a cleaner at the Blue Dolphin Holiday Park in Filey, North Yorkshire, England. Her manager was Heather Wilkinson, and for the first year, no problems were reported with Wheeler's job performance or behavior. The latter, a self-professed goth, then started misinterpreting messages that Wilkinson sent to all her employees and that she typically ended with an X, meaning a kiss. Wheeler reportedly thought that Wilkinson was pursuing a relationship with her and developed an obsession for her boss. By 2020, she'd begun bombarding the woman with texts and messages stemming from her infatuation. Wheeler at one point even sent her a card with her scent on it. Determined to keep their relationship professional, Wilkinson largely ignored Wheeler's advances. The former didn't hear from the employee until March of 2021, when Wheeler reportedly sent her nasty texts and Facebook messages. It would later emerge that Wheeler had been leading a similar harassment campaign against one of her former secondary school teachers, whom she'd sporadically been stalking for 14 years. Wheeler was eventually referred to a clinical psychiatrist, and during a session in 2021, she claimed that she wanted to kill Wilkinson by stoving her head in and also hammer to death her former teacher. Wheeler had made elaborate plans that involved drawing maps, carrying out Google searches, and acquiring a potential murder weapon. The woman, who was at the time in her early 30s, stated an intention of going through with murders after her appointment was over. The psychiatrist asked her to wait in the room and stepped out to call the police. Upon returning, he found that Wheeler had left. She went to find Wilkinson at the Blue Dolphin Holiday Park. Rob Smith, the park's maintenance manager, saw Wheeler walking onto the premises, and the woman told him that she had an interview with Wilkinson. She was wearing black gothic makeup, boots, and a black leather coat, and carried a beige bag with a hammer inside. Wheeler saw Wilkinson get it in her car, at which point she pulled the hammer out and charged her. But the would-be victim managed to steer her vehicle away from the attack. In the moments that followed, Smith tackled Wheeler to the ground. He reportedly heard her saying, "I told my psychiatrist I was coming to kill Heather. They didn't believe me." The woman was arrested and taken to the Scarborough police station. She was seen by a psychiatric nurse, who she reportedly told that seeing the look of fear on Wilkinson's face gave her a buzz. Wheeler also admitted to officers that she wouldn't stop trying to hurt her former boss if she was let out. In the fall of 2021, she pleaded guilty to stalking, making threats to kill, and possessing an offensive weapon. She was jailed for 4 years in order to serve an extended 2-year period on license following her eventual release, in addition to receiving a lifetime restraining order that banned her from making contact with her 2 stalking victims. Number 2. David Beckham. Leading up to the early 2000s, the working relationship between soccer superstar David Beckham and his Manchester United boss, Sir Alex Ferguson, had begun to deteriorate. From the manager's perspective, much of the tension was owed to Beckham's growing fame, a partial consequence of his relationship and eventual marriage to pop star Victoria Adams, also known as Posh Spice, of Spice Girls fame. Ferguson began to question Beckham's commitment to soccer. By most accounts, Beckham continued playing in top shape and was widely regarded as a key component in Manchester United's success in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The building tensions between Beckham and Ferguson, however, reached a boiling point on February the 15th of 2003. At the time, Beckham was struggling to regain his spot on United's lineup, having been replaced by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. While in the dressing room following a match against Arsenal, Ferguson berated Beckham for what he'd regarded as a poor performance. Looking back on the incident in the fall of 2023, Beckham remembered verbally retaliating and saying the F word, which infuriated Ferguson. The boss launched a boot, later reported as belonging to Solskjaer, at Beckham. It struck the latter in the head and caused a cut which needed stitches to mend. Recounting his immediate reaction, Beckham said, "I went at him. Someone had to hold me back." The altercation ended without further incident, and in the summer of 2003, Beckham was traded to Real Madrid, reportedly against his wishes of remaining at United. We'll be lining up our compilation about jobs and occupations that went sideways right after number 1. Stick around if you'd like to watch more. Number 1. Victor Hernandez. Leading up to February of 2018, Victor Hernandez worked as a security guard at the company Guardians of the Future in San Francisco de Macorís in the Dominican Republic. According to other employees, Hernandez had a habit of turning up to work severely intoxicated and had been notified several times in the past. On February the 3rd, he was once again drunk on the job when he began fighting with his boss, 58-year-old Jesus Maria Ureña. The incident was captured by a surveillance camera and the 2 men appeared to be engaged in a shouting match. It culminated with Hernandez aiming a shotgun at Ureña and shooting him. As his boss writhed on the floor, Hernandez turned the weapon towards his own chest. The shotgun flew out of his hands as he pressed the trigger. The man didn't collapse and walked out of frame moments before other workers arrived to check on the boss. Alerted by the commotion, Ureña died at the scene and Hernandez died at the hospital. Number 7. Michael and Vicky Roberts. In December of 2009, 25-year-old Vicky Roberts was found strangled at her and her husband's residence in Runcorn, Cheshire, England. Her body had reportedly been bound with duct tape and hidden under a duvet in the garage. When the police became aware of the situation, Vicky's husband, Michael, went on the run. He proceeded to send his wife's friends and family fake text messages from her phone in which he indicated that she'd left him for another man. Despite his efforts to flee from justice, Michael was eventually tracked down and arrested in connection to Vicky's death, which he claimed to have been an accident, precipitated by an intimate game involving a dressing gown cord. Investigators rejected this version of the events, however, and instead offered the explanation that Vicky had discovered an extramarital affair Michael had been having with 2 of his colleagues at the mobile phone retail store where he worked as the assistant manager. It was reported that the man had been cheating on Vicky throughout their engagement, as well as in the days immediately following their wedding. The police contended that Michael resorted to killing his wife in lieu of ending his involvement with his pair of mistresses. Following Michael's 3-week trial at Liverpool Crown Court, he was convicted of murder and consequently jailed for life, with a mandated minimum term of 17 years. Number 6. Bobby and Jerry Holloway. On the evening of June the 10th of 2016, a woman from Blounsville, Alabama dialed 911 to report that she'd shot her husband. Law enforcement were dispatched to the scene where they found 57-year-old Jerry Holloway suffering from gunshot wounds to the face and chest. He was immediately pronounced dead, and his wife, Bobby, was taken in for questioning. The 60-year-old woman reportedly told investigators that her husband had been verbally abusive during the course of their 35-year marriage and had recently become angry with her, whom he suspected of having an affair with an employee at a local bank. The Holloways had gone to the financial institution in search of a $150,000 loan, which they intended to use to upgrade their chicken houses. While they never closed on the loan, Bobby, her son Chris, and her alleged lover, Danny Goebel, subsequently began plotting how to get Jerry out of the family business, initially by way of divorce. The trio even reportedly discussed the idea of giving Jerry $250,000 to simply leave, but ultimately decided on killing the man who had a $200,000 life insurance policy. Bobby shot her husband twice with a revolver, but was taken into custody before the subsequent stages of her murder plot could come to fruition. The woman, a retired Blount County schoolteacher, was found guilty of murder in early 2020 and consequently faced a minimum 20-year prison sentence. Number 5. Bo and Jennifer Rothwell. Missouri woman Jennifer Rothwell got into a heated argument with her husband Bo about his alleged infidelity on November the 11th of 2019. The 28-year-old woman, who was pregnant at the time, tried to get Bo to reveal the identity of his lover, but he refused. The man later testified that Jennifer proceeded to taunt him that the baby she was carrying wasn't his, and the confrontation then escalated to violence. After entering into what Bo himself labeled a red haze of anger, he struck his wife of 4 years over the head with a mallet, then hit her again as she stumbled towards the garage door, killing her. He subsequently dumped Jennifer's lifeless body in a wooded area located about an hour from their Creve Coeur residence. To cover up the murder, Bo used cleaning supplies to scrub the crime scene and discarded evidence in a dumpster near the highway. In the aftermath, the man reported his wife missing to the authorities, who ultimately identified him as a suspect after finding blood-soaked carpeting during a search of the Rothwell home. It subsequently emerged that prior to her death, Jennifer had conducted a Google search for what to do if your husband is upset you are pregnant. It was also revealed that Bo had created a pros and cons list for ending his marriage to Jennifer only months before he murdered her. In April of 2022, the man was convicted of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abandonment of a corpse. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Elizabeth Hart-Browne and Stephen Rayner. Jewelry designer Elizabeth Hart-Browne and her boyfriend, Stephen Rayner, got into a contentious row upon returning to their shared West London flat after a party on the night of September the 17th of 2016. Court documents indicated that the fight was fueled not only by the copious amounts of alcohol they'd consumed during the course of the evening, but also by an ongoing dispute about Rayner's abusive tendencies and infidelity. As the argument escalated, it culminated with Hart-Browne fatally stabbing Rayner 3 times with a kitchen knife, while her children slept in bedrooms only feet away, months prior to the deadly altercation. 27-year-old Hart-Browne had sent her boyfriend a WhatsApp message in which she accused him of being verbally disparaging, as well as hitting and humiliating her on a regular basis. The woman cited Rayner's purported abuse as the reason for the deterioration of their relationship, and also claimed to have stabbed him in self-defense on the night of their fateful row. However, prosecutors offered a different perspective on the couple's volatile relationship, identifying Hart-Browne as the primary antagonist, who stimulated their arguments with her paranoia and jealous allegations of infidelity. During the course of the 6-week murder trial, the woman detailed how she'd feared for her life after Rainer had bitten her face and waterboarded her in a bathtub. Following 15 hours of deliberation by an Old Bailey jury, Hart-Browne was ultimately acquitted of murder and allowed to walk free. Number 3. Galen Morris and Andre Smith. Just after midnight on June the 3rd of 2022, Indiana police were called to the parking lot of an Indianapolis pub called Tilly's. Officers came upon 26-year-old Andre Smith lying on the ground underneath a vehicle. A statement issued by the city's Metropolitan Police Department indicated that it appeared as though the man had been run over by the car which reportedly belonged to his girlfriend, Galen Morris, also 26 at the time. Emergency responders rushed to the scene to render aid to Smith, who was ultimately pronounced dead. A short time later, his official cause of death was ruled as traumatic asphyxia. Investigators subsequently spoke with several witnesses, one of whom detailed how Morris had allegedly tracked the victim down that night using an Apple AirTag. After seeing Smith with another woman, Morris flew into a rage and attacked her boyfriend's female companion with an empty wine bottle. Smith intervened before the bottle made contact with the other woman, and the three of them were subsequently asked to leave the bar. It was at that point that Morris got into her vehicle and clipped her boyfriend before allegedly backing over him. She then pulled forward and struck him for a third time, inflicting his mortal wounds in the process. Following the vehicular assault, Morris got out and pursued the other woman on foot, but was intercepted by the responding officers, who placed her under arrest. The woman was formally charged with her boyfriend's murder, to which she initially entered a not guilty plea. Number 2. Zoe Davis and Christopher Pickford. On July the 7th of 2018, Zoe Davis took a knife to her abusive boyfriend at his Greater Manchester flat after he told her of an affair he was having. Court records indicated that the 35-year-old woman was consequently arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, resulted in her losing the custody of her 3 children. During the 5 years Davis had been romantically involved with Christopher Pickford leading up to the attack, the couple reportedly had several domestic violence incidents, including one that led to the man spending 2 months behind bars. Although 33-year-old Pickford had been banned from making contact with Davis due to a restraining order, they eventually reconciled their differences and began seeing each other again. In the early hours of July the 7th, the couple's friend, who was staying at the apartment with them, went downstairs to find Davis frantically trying to stymie the profuse bleeding from an apparent knife wound on her boyfriend's chest. Paramedics were called to the scene, where they found the woman repeatedly muttering, "I'm sorry," over the critically injured victim, whose condition was ultimately stabilized at the hospital. Doctors later detailed how Pickford's wound was mere inches away from his heart. During the case's legal proceedings at Minshall Street Crown Court, Davis admitted unlawful wounding and received a suspended 2-year jail sentence as punishment. Number 1. Todd and Amy Mullis. Iowa resident and mother of 3, Amy Mullis was found in critical condition at her family's farm near Earlville on November the 10th of 2018. Her husband, Todd, to whom she'd been married for nearly 15 years, told the police that she'd had a freak accident in which she'd fallen on a rake and been impaled. The 42-year-old man claimed to have found her unresponsive in the shed, at which point their son rushed her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Amy's husband was quick to attribute her death to recurring dizzy spells she'd been having, which had supposedly caused her to lose her balance and fall on the sharp-edged tool. However, an autopsy subsequently revealed the presence of 6 puncture wounds on the woman's body, and her death was officially classified as a homicide. During the ensuing police investigation, it emerged that the Mullises had been experiencing marital problems leading up to Amy's death, and had even stopped sharing a bed after she'd been caught having an affair. Todd's discovery of Amy's extramarital relationship had caused her to fear for her life, and she'd expressed concerns to her friends that he might try to kill her. Investigators uncovered that the man had searched killing unfaithful women online, and had even researched what happened to cheating Aztec wives while allegedly plotting his wife's murder. Todd was ultimately arrested on murder charges, and in September of 2019, was convicted of the crime for which he received a life sentence with no chance of parole. Shocking footage showed the moment California woman Deanna Beck was hit by a garbage truck. She was making her way to her Mission Valley apartment complex in San Diego when the truck suddenly backed into her, impaling her with the huge spikes meant to grab and compact trash. In the video, the 41-year-old could be seen walking along a crosswalk in the underground parking area as the garbage truck moved away to her left on February the 5th of 2021. The driver of the vehicle began reversing at speed with Beck glancing over her shoulder. Two large metal tines attached to the back of the vehicle abruptly edged closer towards her before she could react. As Beck was hit with the outstretched tine, she was thrown to the ground by the sheer impact. The woman suffered severe injury to her spine, neck, and tailbone, as well as a traumatic brain injury that caused her neurological issues. Following the horrific collision, she suffered with seizures, insomnia, hearing loss, vertigo, and struggled with post-concussive syndrome. In the aftermath, Beck was unable to go back to work and decided to sue the company, USA Waste of California, Inc., for damages of over $25,000, which would cover medical expenses, lost wages, loss of earning capacity, and general damage. She filed the lawsuit on September the 8th, 2021, alleging the driver was on his phone at the time, which was why she wasn't spotted. Her attorneys claimed that the driver had already been previously reprimanded several times for operating the garbage vehicle while using his mobile phone. The civil jury trial was set to begin in October of 2023. The latest available updates indicated that the case was still pending. Number 16. Umida Nazarova. While applying for a job at a factory in Borisov, Belarus in early 2022, Umida Nazarova died after her hair got tangled in a machine, causing her scalp to be ripped off. During Nazarova's job interview at the welding wire and electrode manufacturing company Svarmet, she was being shown around by a factory employee. After momentarily pausing to make a record in a register, the employee turned around to see Nazarova lying on the floor unconscious. Apparently, the 21-year-old's hair had gotten stuck in one of the industrial machines and wrapped around her neck as well, leading to her sustaining serious injuries. Despite being freed from the contraption, Nazarova didn't regain consciousness and eventually died. Following Nazarova's death, her father, Dmitry, lamented the fact that 2 lives were taken during the incident. He revealed that his daughter was 7 weeks pregnant during the incident. In the aftermath, the factory paid for the young woman's funeral. Additionally, a factory official was sentenced for failure to fulfill duties due to a dishonest and negligent attitude, causing the death of a person. It was unclear what penalties the unnamed official received. Number 15. Jermani Thompson. On the night of August 30th, 2022, a baggage handler at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport got her hair caught on a conveyor belt, resulting in her tragic death. The victim's mother said that her last words to her daughter Jermani Thompson were, "See you when you get home," but she never made it home. At around 10:20 p.m. on the night in question, Thompson was working on the airport's apron. The Louisiana woman was unloading baggage from a Frontier Airlines flight when her hair suddenly got caught in the belt loader machinery at the airport. Her co-workers tried to cut her hair, but they couldn't. They eventually managed to extricate the 26-year-old, but she was already severely injured. Thompson was rushed to Oshner Medical Center, Kenner, where she was pronounced dead. Number 14. Don't apply makeup inside a running vehicle. An accident left a young Thai woman with an eyeliner pencil lodged in her eye after she attempted to apply makeup during a cab ride in the afternoon of June 12, 2018. The unnamed woman, who was in her 20s, had been applying eyeliner in the back of the taxi during a slow-moving traffic jam in Bangkok's Din Dang suburb. The taxi crashed into a pickup truck. The impact of the crash jolted the woman forward, causing her to hit the back of the front seat and thrust in half of the pencil into her left eye socket. Although the victim was in serious pain, she was still able to talk to responding emergency services and explain what had happened. She was taken to the Rajavithi hospital where the pencil was removed without any permanent injuries. According to paramedic Thanabodhi Sabodhi, the woman's eyesight wasn't affected as the pencil had missed vital parts of her eye. Sabodhi noted that the incident should be a lesson for others who make it a habit to apply makeup inside a running vehicle. Number 13. Tanya Pardazi. Canadian beauty queen and TikTok influencer Tanya Pardazi tragically perished on August 27, 2022 during a freak skydiving accident. Before attempting a solo dive, Pardazi had completed training provided by Skydive Toronto in an Ontario town called Innisfil. The New York Post reported that while the 21-year-old was completing her first solo course with the skydiving facility, the dive went south after she opened the parachute too late during her descent. Pardazi released a quickly rotating main parachute at a low altitude without the time or height required for the reserve parachute to inflate. After the accident, the young woman was rushed to the hospital where she succumbed to injuries sustained in the 4,000-foot fall. Authorities consequently launched a probe into Pardazi's tragic passing, but the outcome of the investigation was never made clear. Number 12. Toni Brown. Englishwoman Toni Brown was almost blinded when industrial-strength washing-up liquid squirted into her eyes while she was cleaning utensils at a Greg's concession store at the Moto Services garage in Franklin. The incident unfolded in October of 2022 while Brown was working a night shift at the aforementioned establishment located on the M5. She poured washing-up liquid into a sink to clean utensils after baking baguettes. Some of the detergent bounced back up into her face, immediately triggering a burning sensation in her eyes and leaving her unable to see. Brown said that the burning sensation was excruciating. She managed to find a first aid box, but it only contained a single pack of plasters. After calling the National Health Services helpline at 111, she was advised to go to an emergency room. Brown called a taxi to take her to Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, where medics told her that the washing up liquid had burned her corneas. Doctors reportedly spent 6 hours pouring liters of saline solution into her eyes to try and wash out the detergent. The woman was later transferred to Birmingham and Midland Eye Centre, where she discovered the liquid should only be handled while wearing PPE for more than a week. Brown was left completely blind with her family washing, dressing, feeding, and moving her around the house. A couple of months later, her eyesight improved, but she was still left with blurry vision in one eye. The 37-year-old said that she took legal action against Moto Services, which consequently admitted a breach of liability for the accident via their insurer. As of October of 2023, a spokeswoman for Moto Service stations told Mail Online that they couldn't discuss the case due to the ongoing legal processes. Number 11. Vehicles falling in the middle of Chinese roads. In June of 2012, a freak accident occurred in Guilin, China, during which a minivan fell straight through a road. The hole had appeared suddenly and seemingly without cause, and the van fell about 1 meter before crashing down on its side. The driver was wounded and taken to a local hospital. A local news source stated that sudden holes in roads were common in the country because of shoddy construction. Authorities blamed bad weather for sudden holes in roads. Similar craters have been known to swallow up entire trucks. The news website posted photos of similar instances that occurred years earlier. The images show trucks falling into craters on the road in September of 2010 and in April and May of 2011. The incidents shown had taken place in Anshan, Lanzhou, Beijing, and Changchun, respectively. Number 10. A real miracle. A group of Australian teens out on a trip narrowly escaped with their lives after a tree branch speared through the windscreen of their car near Lake Mackenzie on K'gari, Queensland. The incident took place on the afternoon of November 22nd, 2023, while 4 girls were heading back to their resort at Yurong a massive branch collided with the vehicle's windscreen and plunged into the headrest of the front passenger seat. Luckily, the girl who'd been sitting in the seat at the time managed to get out of the way, and no one was sitting at the back before the branch plowed straight through and into the back seat. Rescuers from the youth group, Red Frogs, were alerted to the crash and rushed to the scene to help the group. They got a tractor to pull the branch out, then drove the shell-shocked girls back to Yurong. According to Red Frog's CEO, Andrew Gawley, the branch had fallen onto the dirt road the night before during a storm. Gawley added that the group didn't go expressly fast or anything. They just didn't see that branch coming out because of all the trees everywhere. He further stated that it was a real miracle that no one was injured. Number 9. Jessica Lally. In October of 2021, Englishwoman Jessica Lally died after falling from a bucking bronco ride at an American-themed bar in Sheffield. The 26-year-old and her friends had been on a night out at the Broncos Rodeo Bar on West Street. The bar had a mechanical bull that customers could ride, and Lally decided to give it a go. She fell off the ride, which is the usual course of things, but suffered cardiac arrest almost immediately. A spokesperson for the bar said that Lally received medical help but sadly passed away. The spokesperson also said that the victim passed all of the safety checks and that the mechanical bull had been set on the slowest speed, which had mainly been used for photos. In the wake of the incident, the police and the council conducted their investigation. The investigation ultimately determined that the cause of death wasn't related to the bull. Lally's devastated mother said that Lally had been planning to marry her partner and her death was heartbreaking. Number 8. Naima Ralston, Peyton Stewart, Aisha Wirham, and Deslyn Williams. 22-year-old California man Fraser Michael Baum, who was accused of mowing down 4 Pepperdine University students, was released on a $4 million bond after pleading not guilty to murder charges on October 17, 2023. Baum was allegedly involved in a road rage incident during which a male suspect gave chase and tried to push him off the side of the road. Baum accelerated to get away from him and eventually lost control of his red BMW along the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. He swerved onto the shoulder of the road and slammed into 3 parked vehicles. Those vehicles consequently hit 4 women walking nearby on the side of the roadway. Witnesses claimed Baum tried to flee the scene after the collision, but he was apprehended by onlookers. The female victims, Peyton Stewart, Asha Weir, Deslyn Williams, all aged 21, and 20-year-old Naima Ralston were pronounced dead at the scene. At the time of the incident, Baum was taken into custody and charged with vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence. He was initially released, pending further investigation. Baum's attorney, Michael Kraut, said that the driver who'd chased Baum was identified and that the individual had admitted to a family member that they did drive Baum off the road. Kraut added that the defendant had to get away and reasonably drive at approximately 70 miles per hour. On October 24th, the young man was rearrested and charged with 4 counts of murder. Subsequent information indicated that Baum was awaiting his preliminary trial hearing. No further updates have been made as of Baum's release on October 27th. Number 7. Michael Raper. 26-year-old sausage factory worker Michael Raper suffered what the Daily Mail called a grisly end when he slipped and fell feet first into a meat grinder on July 12, 2011. Raper had been in charge of cleaning the grinder at the Bar S Foods plant in Lawton, Oklahoma. He slipped, fell, and got entangled in the huge auger, which chewed off his legs. Raper was stuck from the waist down for 2 excruciating hours before emergency workers were able to reach him. They used a forklift to stabilize the auger while cutting it in two, lifted up the auger and pulled Raper from the machinery. Raper was taken to Comanche County Memorial Hospital but died the following day. The incident prompted an investigation carried out by the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Bar S Foods said that they were cooperating and added that they have a positive record of safety practices. It never became clear what the outcome of the investigation was. Number 6. Incident at the Fossil Rim Wildlife Center. On October 12, 2023, a Texas family's car was significantly damaged when a giraffe fell on top of it at the Fossil Rim Wildlife Center in Glen Rose. Driver Carrie Hill, along with her 2 teen sons and infant granddaughter, had arrived at the Wildlife Conservation Facility. She drove her Kia Sorento through the 1,800-acre facility and stopped close to a giraffe. The animal poked its head through the Sorrento's sunroof. At that point, Hill took a photo with the animal before it suddenly lost its balance and came tumbling down onto the vehicle's windshield. The windshield started caving in while the giraffe flayed around, attempting to get back up. After a few seconds, the long-necked creature regained its footing and ran off. Hill pulled her car off to the side, called the park's emergency hotline, and requested assistance. Her car was eventually towed away. Fossil Rim said that the incident was the first of its kind in their 11 years at the site. Fortunately, no one was injured during the freak accident, including the giraffe. However, the family car sustained nearly $4,200 in damages from the incident. Despite the scary encounter, Hill said she would revisit the park at some point. When asked about it, she answered, probably in someone else's car though. Number 5. Rachel Pig Hills. Watching my wife suffer and dying before my eyes is soul-destroying, said Englishman Guy Pighills after his wife Rachel suffered a debilitating injury. In August of 2018, Rachel, from Worcestershire, was moving into a new house when the spinning blades of a ceiling fan smashed her on the back of the head, causing catastrophic injuries. The woman was left wheelchair-bound due to rare conditions called atlantoaxial instability and bacillar invagination, which meant her brain was sinking into her spine as her skull dropped. The conditions prohibited her from turning her head in certain ways, as each time she did, her spine would partially dislocate, increasing the risk of paralysis or death. In January of 2020, she underwent occipital spinal fusion surgery to relieve the compression from her brain stem and improve her quality of life. Sadly, the doctor failed in the effort. Rachel and Guy spent years raising more than $430,000 for a pioneering treatment not available on the country's National Health Service. In 2022, the couple finally reached the milestone with the help of a Warwickshire woman who loaned them approximately $160,000. Rachel was too unwell to fly. As such, the couple took to the road in May of 2022. She was driven by her husband on a 17-hour, 1,055-mile journey to Barcelona, Spain, in a second-hand ambulance. Upon reaching Tyquan Hospital, Rachel underwent a 13.5-hour operation during which doctors inserted metal rods into her spine and reset her skull and brain stem. 6 months later, Rachel's condition improved. The 36-year-old could walk unaided without a neck brace for the first time in 4 years. Rachel said doctors in Barcelona had been left in awe by her progress, while her 42-year-old husband called it an absolute miracle. Number 4. Charles Hugh Crooks. An investigation into a young pilot's deadly fall concluded that he'd accidentally plummeted from the aircraft mid-flight in North Carolina after he allegedly went aft near the open ramp. 23-year-old Charles Hugh Crooks and the pilot in command had been flying for a private company that was dropping skydivers in a small field on July 29, 2022. While dropping off the skydivers, the 1983 CASA C212 came across an issue with its landing gear, forcing the pilot in command to notify air traffic control and change course to make an emergency landing at Raleigh-Durham International Airport. At that point, they were flying at approximately 3,500 feet, and the plane encountered moderate turbulence, causing Crooks to feel unwell. Investigators believe that Crooks departed the cockpit and walked towards the open ramp to vomit, but accidentally fell to his death. His body was later found in a Fuquay Varina backyard, hours after the pilot in command landed the plane safely. No drugs or alcohol were found in the victim's system at the time of his death, but officials said he'd broken multiple bones and damaged his heart, lungs, and other internal organs in the fall. Number 3. Diana Lynn Phelps. On the morning of September 11, 2023, an Indiana woman lost her life in a freak accident when a wheel from a passing pickup truck broke loose and smashed through her windshield. Shortly before 8 a.m. on the day in question, 68-year-old Diana Lynn Phelps was driving down the westbound lane of Interstate 70 near Indianapolis when the left rear wheel broke off a Nissan pickup truck traveling in the eastbound lane. The New York Post reported that the dislodged wheel careened across the median and then bounced up into Phelps's SUV, causing the windshield to collapse in and the front end of the roof to tear away. She immediately lost control of the car and crashed through a fence. The impact caused her vehicle to travel around 300 feet before finally coming to rest on its side in a yard about 25 feet from a house near Coral and Wyoming streets. After a 911 call was placed by a witness, paramedics arrived at the scene to find Phelps unresponsive in her damaged car. They attempted to save her, but she died at the scene. The driver of the Nissan that lost its wheel was located by police. It was unclear if any charges would be pressed. Subsequent information indicated that reconstruction detectives were still investigating what had caused the wheel to come off. Today's topic was requested by None of Your Business 9441. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Olivia Kaiser. On February 5th, 2023, Love Island USA star Olivia Kaiser shared online photos of her broken nose after a freak accident. The incident took place while the 30-year-old was appearing in the 38th season finale of the reality show, The Challenge Ride or Die. Kaiser was first injured while participating in the show's bowler throwing competition. Her finger was sliced open, causing nerve exposure after a fastener being used in the challenge caught her finger. After getting treated by medics, Kaiser continued through the competition. Later in the competition, she was injured again during a slingshot challenge, which involved her using a sling to repeatedly hit a target with a ball. While aiming for the target, her injured hand slipped and inadvertently released the sling, causing the ball to ricochet and hit her straight in the face. Kaiser screamed in pain as medics responded. She was left with 2 black eyes covered in purple and yellow bruising and a huge bruise between her eyebrows. Her nose was split open at the bridge and covered in blood. Her injury stopped her from completing the competition. She was later taken to a hospital where she spent 2 nights. Her nose eventually healed after it was stitched up and reset. Following the incident, Kaiser posted online saying no one should be ashamed of a scar. It simply meant that you were stronger than whatever tried to hurt you. Stick around after number 1 if you want to watch our previous episode about when fleeing the scene of an accident goes wrong. Number 1. Delray Rosario. 36-year-old Delray Rosario died after slipping and falling off a treadmill at a gym in Kent, Washington State, on the morning of July 21, 2023. Witnesses claimed that while Rosario was working out at an LA Fitness on the day in question, she took a bad step on the treadmill and slipped forward, smashing her head into the front of the machine before slumping over and being tossed off the machine. Rosario was left unconscious and fellow gym goers immediately attempted to administer first aid to her. Moments later, emergency medical technicians and paramedics responded to the scene and treated Rosario before transferring her to an area hospital. Unfortunately, due to the bleeding in the brain that the woman had sustained from the fall, she died the following day. In the aftermath, the victim's sister, Marissa Woods, told Good Morning America that she wanted to share Rosario's story to spread awareness about the importance of knowing CPR, especially when in a fitness facility. Woods added that during the incident, gym staff just stood idly looking shocked. She further stated that if you work in a gym, the least you should know is CPR. Rosario had been registered as an organ donor, and Woods claimed that 5 people received potentially life-saving transplants thanks to Rosario's selflessness. An off-duty officer from the Shelbyville Police Department in Kentucky was killed in a hit-and-run collision during the early hours of August the 23rd of 2022. Court records revealed that 50-year-old Thomas Elmore was riding his motorcycle near Outer Loop in Louisville when he was suddenly struck by a car. The motorist 28-year-old Ashley Catlett had been attempting to make a left turn onto Briarcliff Road when she made contact with Elmore. The latter was thrown from his motorcycle and consequently died, but Catlett didn't stick around after the crash. She fled the scene on foot and eventually showed up at a friend's house nearby and asked him for help. Her purse, which contained her ID, was left inside her vehicle at the scene of the accident. The Louisville Police Department quickly identified Catlett and took her into custody. She was held at Louisville Metro Corrections on a $50,000 cash bond. Following her arrest, it emerged that Catlett had had several other run-ins with the law in the past, for which she previously faced charges of fourth-degree assault, domestic violence, as well as numerous drug-related offenses. Back in 2013, Catlett was charged with reckless driving for traveling more than 25 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Number 5. Justin Sarecchia. Shortly before 8 p.m. on March the 8th of 2017, Brevard County firefighter Justin Sarecchia struck a Lexus along a residential street in Orlando, Florida. Although the man did pull over and speak with the driver whose car he hit, he refused to provide his license and insurance information, despite being asked to do so by a sheriff's deputy at the scene. The other motorist, who wasn't identified, claimed that Sarecchia's breath smelled of alcohol and also accused the man of spitting his chewing gum at him and cursing him out while repeatedly proclaiming that he was a soldier and a firefighter. Sarecchia eventually left the scene without fulfilling his legal obligations as a party to a car accident. A female state trooper was dispatched to his home later that evening after he'd already fallen asleep. As could be clearly heard on dash cam footage, Sarecchia belittled the officer, saying to his fiancée, "She's just some girl, she's useless," then telling her to call a man here. The trooper subsequently informed the man that he was being charged for the earlier hit and run, at which point he became wholly uncooperative and backup was called to help with the arrest. Sarecchia allegedly tried to bite one of the officers as he was being placed in handcuffs and led into the squad car. While en route to the county jail, he proceeded to hurl obscenities and insults at the police, telling them he was going to ruin their lives. During the following summer, Sarecchia had his charges of leaving the scene of a crash and resisting an officer dropped, and he was allowed to keep his job with the Brevard County Fire Department. Number 4. Obi-Wan Kenobi. A California man went viral for his pop culture-themed name after he was arrested in May of 2012 in connection with a 5-car pileup in Roseville. Authorities said that the incident occurred on March the 19th at Fairway and Rose Hall Drives. 37-year-old Obi-Wan Kenobi reportedly plowed his green Toyota into 2 other cars as he tried to merge between them. The collision set off a chain reaction that came to involve an additional 2 vehicles. Kenobi fled the scene following the wreck and, after further investigation, was identified as the individual responsible. Officers arrested him at his home, after which he was taken to Placer County Jail in lieu of a $17,500 bond. The man was charged with hit and run causing injury and had also reportedly been wanted on an unrelated petty theft charge. At the time, in the wake of his arrest, many were interested in learning the origins of Kenobi's distinguished Star Wars-centric name. According to subsequent reports, the man, born Benjamin Cale Fyatt, changed his name back in 1999 as part of a $1,000 bet aired by a local radio station to promote the release of Star Wars Episode 1. In February of 2013, it was reported that Kenobi had found himself in trouble with the law yet again after a Roseville police officer found meth in his possession during a probation search. Number 3. Joanna Iovino. 2 men were fatally struck by a passing car in Holtsville, a hamlet on Long Island, New York, at about 5:30 p.m. on May the 11th of 2022. At the time of the accident, 37-year-old Ryan Walker and Robert Kallenbeck, aged 46, were working on the engine of a 1989 Ford F-150 pickup truck that was parked outside the former's home on Express Drive South. Then suddenly, a vehicle being driven by Lake Ronkonkoma woman Joanna Iovino crashed into the men, but the latter neglected to stop, instead fleeing the scene. Walker and Kallenbeck were subsequently rushed to Stony Brook University Hospital, but neither of them ultimately survived. 30-year-old Iovino was arrested and charged with 2 counts of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. She was arraigned in 1st District Court in Central Islip a few days later. A judge set her bail at $100,000. Number 2. Lucy Ashton. On a sunny Sunday morning in September of 2020, a group of locals from Sefton village in Merseyside, England came upon a severely injured cyclist near a pub on Lunt Road called the Punch Bowl. The victim, later identified as 31-year-old National Health Service employee Jennifer Dowd, was lying in the middle of the road in obvious critical condition. She was unconscious, bleeding, and the frame of her bicycle was completely buckled. Upon being taken to the hospital, Dowd was placed in a medically induced coma before succumbing to unsurvivable head injuries 9 days later. As local police kicked off their investigation, they received a call from 24-year-old Lucy Ashton, a care support worker, who indicated she might have been the one responsible for the deadly collision. As it would subsequently be revealed, Ashton had been fighting with her boyfriend until the early hours of the morning and consequently woke up late for work on the day of the crash. She admitted to being in a rush and not focused on her driving as she got behind the wheel of her Ford Focus and started on her route. It was a bright, dry, clear morning, and Ashton thus had trouble seeing the road because of the sun in her eyes. At some point, she struck Dowd on her bicycle. The driver claimed to have heard a bang, then looked in the rearview mirror and saw the cyclist. Rather than render aid to the victim, however, she panicked and drove away. Upon returning to the scene later, Ashton reported seeing loads of people, so she left once again to get her head together. She later phoned the police and ultimately confessed to her involvement in the tragedy. Following criminal proceedings at Liverpool Crown Court, Ashton was jailed for 12 months and also had her driving privileges revoked for a year. Number 1. Daniel Campbell. The police on Long Island, New York, broke up a house party in Amagansett on August the 10th of 2021. Some of the displaced partygoers subsequently began walking home down Timber Trail, a dark and winding two-way road with no streetlights or sidewalks, as a group that included 18-year-old Devesh Samtani and his cousin Kabir Korani made its way down the street. A car suddenly drove up behind them and grazed the young girl before making forceful impact with Samtani. The teen was flung into the air and landed a few feet onto the grass, bleeding and unconscious. He was rushed to Southampton Hospital before being transported to Stony Brook University Hospital, where he was left fighting for his life. Samtani had only arrived in the US from Hong Kong days earlier, as he awaited the start of his freshman year at New York University. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries before being able to commence his collegiate career. Following the accident, the driver who struck Samtani, identified as Hastings-on-Hudson resident Daniel Campbell, decided not to call 911 and even allegedly made efforts to flee the state, which he later blamed on a panic attack triggered by repeated sports-related concussions. Campbell, who'd been visiting his parents in Montauk that night, had reportedly packed 9 passengers into his SUV and was distracted when he hit Samtani. When speaking with detectives, the young man confessed to his mistake, saying, "I know I should have stayed, but I freaked out," before going on to admit that when he looked at the damage to his car, he thought Samtani might be dead. In September of 2022, a plea deal was announced, which stipulated that Campbell would plead guilty to a felony charge of leaving the scene of an accident causing death. Suffolk County Judge Richard Ambro initially promised the young man that he would not have to face jail time despite the severity of the crime. The judge later went back on that decision, but only slightly, when he handed down a sentence of 90 days in jail plus 5 years probation. Samtani's family was understandably outraged by the lenient punishment, to which the teen's mother responded with, "Our child's life didn't matter. That's what we felt, that our son's life didn't matter." TikToker Michaela Witter, aged 28, posted a clip on the platform in early August of 2023 of her encounter with a serial prowler at a Barnes & Noble in Burbank, California. Witter began recording on her phone after she'd noticed that a man later identified as 36-year-old Kales Crowder was following her through the store. The woman captured the moment that Crowder crouched behind her and appeared to be sniffing her backside. Witter recorded him doing the same thing behind another woman in the store. When Crowder returned, got down and approached Witter again, she turned around and confronted him, asking what he was doing. The man replied that he was tying his shoe. Witter reported him to the front desk and left. In her TikTok, she described the incident as one of her creepiest experiences ever. When the video went viral, multiple women came forward reporting that Crowder had done the same thing to them. The Burbank Police Department launched an investigation, but the man wasn't arrested for the sniffing incident. However, later in August, he was taken into custody for peeping on a Glendale family's home while their children were home. He pleaded no contest to the prowling charge and was sentenced to 60 days in county jail. He was released within days of serving his sentence, with the condition that he registered as an offender, which he failed to do, prompting him to be rearrested less than a week later. He was released once again due to a legal technicality that involved providing notice regarding specific registration requirements. His latest arrest marked the 44th time he'd been taken into custody in Los Angeles County since 2005. In spite of his long history of peeping, prowling, and residential burglaries and his most recent crimes, Crawford remained, as of the latest updates, a free man. Number 9. Incident in South Nashville. In January of 2019, Facebook user Mackenzie Stevens posted about a harrowing incident that took place on her property in South Nashville, Tennessee. The woman's surveillance cameras captured a ski mask wearing peeping Tom as he walked up to her bedroom window. Stevens later told WKRN, "I think he was maybe looking at what I had, or maybe looking at me." The woman reported that he remained outside her home for 15 minutes before her dog, Atticus, scared him away. She would credit the alert pet with possibly saving her life and described the incident as the scariest thing she'd ever experienced. In the aftermath, she repositioned the cameras and added motion sensor lights to her yard. Stevens also filed a police report, but no arrests were made in the immediate aftermath. Number 8. Tyree Parker. Leading up to August of 2021, serial prowler Tyree Parker was suspected of having carried out multiple auto thefts in the Riverside neighborhood of Jacksonville, Florida. In July, the 22-year-old had made off with a pistol from an unlocked vehicle. Then, in the early morning hours of August 3rd, he was caught in the act by 26-year-old Caroline Scholart as he was trying to break into her vehicle outside her Riverside home. Scholart was an active member of the U.S. Coast Guard, having served for over 8 years, and had reportedly been accustomed through her training in dealing with high-pressure situations. She drew a pistol and held Parker at gunpoint as she called 911. Parker brandished the weapon he'd previously stolen, and a standoff ensued. Gunfire erupted during the 911 call as Parker shot Scholart multiple times. Home and neighborhood security video showed the shooting and the suspect before and after he ran down the sidewalk and got into a waiting vehicle. Scholart died later that morning, and Parker surrendered to local law enforcement about a week after the shooting. During the legal proceedings that followed, a clinical psychologist testified that Parker had an IQ of 66, which qualified him as intellectually disabled. On the 5th of July 2022, the man pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed burglary. After sentencing Parker to life in prison, Judge Meredith Chartbula told him, "Listening to this young lady die was one of the most chilling things I've ever heard, and I'm old, and I've heard a lot." Court video showed that Parker had virtually no reaction to the verdict. Number 7. Kenton Driscoll. In the spring of 2022, law enforcement in Farmington Hills, Michigan, arrested Kenton Driscoll, a man in his late 50s, following multiple incidents in which he'd lurked in people's backyards and peered through their windows. Resident Dennis Furman's home was one of Driscoll's targets. Furman described the incident as extremely creepy, given that he was at home with his wife and 3 children when Driscoll walked onto their back deck at around 12 o'clock at night. A manhunt was launched, and video from a police drone captured the moment that Driscoll was taken into custody while he was camping in the woods near I-696 and Orchard Lake Road. The arrest marked one of several times that the man had already been taken into custody for prowling incidents perpetrated against Oakland County communities. Then in October of 2022, Driscoll was once again arrested by law enforcement in Warren, after he'd been seen by residents peeping through their windows late at night. He'd also been captured on multiple security cameras. Warren police set up an investigation in the area of 11 Mile and Ryan on October the 11th and eventually spotted Driscoll. He was arrested while trying to flee on a bicycle. He was caught with a sack full of burglary tools, which included a handsaw, box cutter, pry bar, and screwdriver. Driscoll described them as typical handyman tools and claimed his arrest was illegal. At the time, he'd amassed 9 prior convictions for disorderly conduct and being a peeping Tom. As per updates from late January of 2023, a court psychiatrist determined that Driscoll was not competent to understand the charges leveled against him. As per a judge's ruling, he had to be treated to competency within 15 months of the charges to face them in criminal court or else be released. Number 6. Casi Noel Encarnacion. On August the 29th of 2023, Roland Alexander was found dead at his home just west of the Whittier city limits in the unincorporated South Whittier area in Los Angeles County. 84-year-old Alexander had been brutally stabbed to death by an intruder who'd entered his home through an unlocked door. After killing him, the intruder stole his car, a Toyota RAV4, and drove it for a day before abandoning it in Chino. The authorities subsequently released surveillance photos of the wanted man, a suspected prowler, as he was running near the victim's home. He was identified as the same suspect who'd assaulted another elderly man in the area shortly before stabbing Alexander. That attack, however, was broken up by the victim's son. On September the 3rd of 2023, deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Special Enforcement Bureau served a warrant at a home in La Habra. 25-year-old Casi Noel Encarnacion was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder, 2 counts of burglary, and 1 count of attempted mayhem. As of the latest information available to the media, Encarnacion had pleaded not guilty to all of his charges. Number 5. Charles Marcel Newman. In November of 2023, serial prowler Charles Marcel Newman was arrested for trying to break into the same home in Santa Monica, California, over the course of several months. A homeowner in the 200 block of 24th Street had reported Newman to local police in September and October after he was captured on their surveillance cameras trying doors, windows, and car door handles on the premises. By the time that officers from the Santa Monica Police Department arrived at the scene in November, 46-year-old Newman had already been detained in the driveway by private security officers working for the homeowner. Newman was reported as homeless, was expected to be charged with multiple attempted burglaries, and since he was also a registered offender with violations of his registration conditions, the man, who appeared to have fresh bruises on his face in his most recent mugshot, had a long history of prowling incidents in Santa Monica for which he'd been convicted in the past. From January the 14th through the 21st of 2019, he carried out at least 5 early morning burglary attempts, some of which were caught on surveillance cameras. He'd previously done time for prowling-related crimes in 2012. Number 4. Alan Jacobson. In late September of 2023, law enforcement in Toronto, Canada, was called to Queen Street East and Woodbine Avenue following reports that a man had followed a girl home from a bus stop. No arrests were made at the time, but 2 days later, on September the 26th, the same suspect appeared in the backyard of a home in the area of Queen Street East and Victoria Park Avenue. 57-year-old Alan Jacobson was arrested on the property's front porch. According to an official release from September the 28th, the authorities were concerned that there could be more victims. Jacobson faced charges of harassment by following, prowling by night, and failing to comply with release order. Number 3. Tyler Giuliano. Connecticut teacher Jeffrey Giuliano from New Fairfield received a call from his sister on September the 27th of 2012, in which she told him that someone was outside her home Jeffrey lived next door to his sister, so he grabbed his legally owned gun and went to investigate what he believed to be a prowling incident. He came upon a ski mask wearing intruder who moved towards him in a threatening manner with a shiny object in hand. Jeffrey shot the intruder 3 times. Law enforcement found the suspect dead in the driveway with a knife in his hand. Hours later, Jeffrey learned that he'd shot his own son, teenager Tyler. What the latter, a well-liked student at New Fairfield High School, had been doing prowling around his aunt's home remained unknown. Reports from those who knew him suggested that robbery wasn't within his character, which urged some to theorize that he'd been carrying out a prank. Jeffrey and his wife had taken in Tyler and his sister roughly 4 years prior. Their biological father had received a prison sentence, and they would have otherwise gone to an orphanage. The Giulianos, who had 3 other children, adopted them. Jeffrey was reported as inconsolable upon learning that he'd inadvertently gunned down his son. He and his wife fully cooperated with law enforcement in the tragedy's wake. One town official described the incident as something out of a Hollywood script. The shooting was ultimately deemed justified, and no charges were brought against the grieving father. Today's topic was requested by Cali Girl Living in Nevada 8. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Gimp Man. In 2019, English woman Abby Conroy and her wife, Pip, moved to the village of Claverham, Somerset, in search of a quiet life. Once they got settled in the quaint village, Abby would go for walks, often at night, as the exercise reportedly helped her deal with her anxiety. On one such night in the summer of 2019, she encountered a prowler known as Gimp Man. To local residents, he was wearing a full black rubbery outfit with X-marked red eyes and stitching around the mouth. The man was reported to have been grunting and breathing heavily. Before charging at 23-year-old Abby, bystanders intervened and they snapped a photo of the prowler before they and Abby were able to chase him off. He disappeared into a hedge. Speaking to the media in the aftermath, the severely distraught woman reported that she was initially unsure if she was dreaming or not. She told the Daily Mail, "If I could speak to him now, I'd want to know why he does what he does. Everything is running through my head. I'd want him to know just how scary it was." Pip added that the incident had left them feeling paranoid and that they'd fitted their home with a security light. Gimp Man had been a problem in Somerset and its surrounding areas for years. He was known for jumping out on residents, appearing at their windows at night, behaving inappropriately towards animals, and performing suggestive acts. Since November of 2018, local police had received over a dozen reports related to the prowler. Following the incident with Abby and a photo that emerged from it, Gimp Man attracted international attention, and the New York Post reported the story with the headline, "Freak dressed in black gimp suit terrorizes UK village." Several more sightings were reported leading up to May of 2023, when on 2 separate occasions, a man in a black suit and mask terrified female motorists driving home at night. The victim spotted him crawling and writhing on the ground. Local farmer Joshua Hunt, aged 32, was arrested minutes after the second incident on May the 9th. He'd previously been taken in custody on suspicion of causing a public nuisance over a series of similar incidents in the Cleve, Claverham, and Yatton areas in 2022, but was released due to insufficient evidence. A search of his home, carried out after his 2023 arrest, produced a journal in which Hunt had written a story about someone called Jack, who purchased a black rubber suit and a mask with white paint on it. He described the latter in writing as a face that would scare the life out of anyone. He'd also made Google searches about the Somerset Gimp. Hunt admitted in court that he struggled with his mental health and took responsibility for the May incidents. He was found guilty of causing intentional harassment, alarm, or distress, and banned from wearing the suit for 5 years. Aside from the time he'd spent awaiting his punishment, Hunt avoided a custodial sentence. While the authorities claimed that the Gimp Man had finally been apprehended, many remained skeptical and feared he was on the loose, ready to strike again. Hunt himself denied being the notorious prowler, adding, "The outfit I wear is not anything to do with the Gimp." We'll line up when inviting strangers into your home goes wrong right after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like to watch that episode as well still. Number 1. Joseph Zeiler. In May of 1990, Joan Cornell returned to her condominium in Cape Coral, Florida, to find that her daughter Robin and her babysitter, 32-year-old Lisa Story, had been brutally murdered. In the investigation that followed, it emerged that a prowler had broken into the home while the victims were sleeping. He abused them both before beating and strangling them to death. The case went cold for nearly 3 decades until Joseph Zeiler, a man in his early 50s, was arrested for an unrelated assault. In 2016, he provided a DNA sample that proved to be a match to material collected from the 1990 crime scene. Zeiler was arrested for the double murder, but he pleaded not guilty. On the eve of his trial, he wore an ill-fitting veneer over his teeth on which he'd written the word killer in permanent marker. The writing was visible when the deranged defendant opened his mouth. During his trial, Zeiler claimed that he'd had intercourse with Cornell a few months prior to the slayings, which was why his DNA was present at the scene. When prosecutors pointed out that the sample wouldn't have been detected after such a long time, Zeiler called Cornell, who was in attendance, a pig who never washed her sheets. That woman was adamant that she'd never met him prior to him being identified as her daughter's killer during his incarceration. Zeiler had sent Cornell 3 separate letters threatening retaliation if she didn't impede the investigation into the killings. While he was on the witness stand, Zeiler made vulgar gestures and yelled at the jury in a display which his lawyer, Lee Hollander, reported felt like sitting down watching a train wreck. Zeiler was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder after only a few hours of deliberations. In May of 2023, 10 out of 12 jurors recommended that he'd be given the death penalty. Before the sentence was officially handed down, Zeiler, who was shackled, called over his other attorney, Kevin Shirley. The latter leaned over, assuming Zeiler wanted to whisper something to him. In the moments that followed, as captured on courtroom video, the convicted killer elbowed Shirley in the side of the head. He was immediately tackled to the ground by bailiffs and removed from the courtroom. Zeiler's behavior throughout the proceedings arguably reflected what Cornell had previously said about him, that he is evil. There are no feelings there. He's just blank. In early December of 2022, a Los Angeles attorney shared the story of how he was robbed by 2 women whom he'd invited at his home in the Hollywood Hills. The unnamed man told a local media outlet that he'd met the women, only identified as Holly and Brittany, while bar hopping in Beverly Hills on July the 25th of 2022. He reported that he, along with his friends and the women, decided to bring the party back to his home. After his friends had left at around 3 a.m., the lawyer went into his bedroom with Holly and Brittany, but remembered that things weren't adding up as the women were randomly texting before they started giving him vodka shots. He became unconscious and woke up roughly 15 hours later to find his home ransacked. The lawyer believed that the drinks Holly and Brittany had given him were laced with drugs, as he'd reportedly never before passed out from alcohol. The women made off with cash and 3 Rolex watches, which the victim estimated were worth close to $18,000. Still, the man stated that they could have done a lot worse and felt fortunate to have emerged from the incident with just his possessions stolen. Surveillance photos of the suspects were released by the authorities, but as of the latest updates, they hadn't been arrested. Number 6. Summer Desjardins and Daniel Wargo. In April of 2020, an unnamed Michigan man talked to 24-year-old Summer Desjardins on Facebook and invited her to his home. Macomb Daily would later report that they discussed the meetup as an intercourse for drugs type of arrangement. However, Desjardins had actually been planning to rob the victim with her boyfriend, 21-year-old Daniel Wargo. When Desjardins arrived at the address, Wargo forced his way inside with a handgun, announcing the robbery. The victim refused to comply with his demands, and a confrontation ensued, during the course of which Wargo shot him in the torso. He and his girlfriend then fled the scene in a Chevrolet Cavalier, but were tracked down through their social media profiles and arrested later that same day. The victim was taken to a Detroit hospital and pronounced to be in stable condition. In 2021, Wago was given a sentence of 15 to 30 years in prison after pleading guilty to armed robbery, attempted murder, possession of a weapon by a felon, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. That same year, Desjardins pleaded no contest to conspiracy to commit armed robbery in exchange for the dismissal of other charges. In September, the mother of two, who admitted that she had methamphetamine addiction, was sentenced to 6 to 28 years in prison. Number 5. Luke Lembrick. In the summer of 2019, Australian man Luke Lembrick, aged 29, matched with Lisa Ann Price, then in her early 30s, on Tinder, and they started texting each other. In December, Price sent him a photo of herself and another woman, claiming that she wanted to bring her to his residence. The duo arrived at the Condell Park home in Western Sydney, which Lembrick shared with his mother, Robin, who was terminally ill from bone cancer. The trio went to Lembrick's bedroom, where they partook in alcohol and cocaine. At some point during the rendezvous, he showed the women a stack of bills amounting to around $15,000, as well as a blazer that had cash overflowing from its pockets. The display of wealth reportedly gave Price the idea to do him over, and in the early hours of December the 7th, 3 men raided Lembrick's home. They were subsequently identified as Joseph Nem, Bilal Rahim, and Viliami Tuafahima. A confrontation ensued, during the course of which Lembrick was stabbed multiple times with a knife that had reportedly been taken from his home. Robin was reported to have witnessed the attack that had floored Lembrick, who then told her, "I'm going to die, Mum. I'm going to die." The emergency services were called to the home at around 2:45 a.m. Paramedics found Lembrick in critical condition and were unable to save him, as he succumbed to a stab wound that had pierced his heart. The 5 people connected to his death were arrested in the aftermath. Nem, Bilal, and Tuafahima were charged with murder as well as aggravated break-in and entering with intent to commit a serious indictable offense in company, among other charges. Price was brought before the court as an accessory before the fact to murder, in addition to being charged with aggravated break-in and entering. Shireen Rizk, aged 46, the woman who was reported to have accompanied her to the residence, was charged with being an accessory before the fact to murder. All 5 defendants were ordered to stand trial in February of 2023. Number 4. Incident in Fort Lauderdale. While out at the rooftop at One Willow Bar in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a man shared drinks with 2 women until the early hours of December the 4th of 2022. They exchanged numbers, and about an hour later, he met them again outside of Rock Bar and drove them to his Lauderdale by the Sea home for cocktails. The man would later report that he had never lost sight of his drink while they were at his house. It's believed that they had relations, after which the man fell asleep. Upon waking up, he realized that his Platinum Amex credit card had been taken from his back pocket, while his $25,000 Submariner Blueface Rolex watch had been removed from his wrist. He texted the women regarding the whereabouts of his valuables but received no answer back, so he reported them to the Broward County Sheriff's Office. The authorities launched an investigation and released clear surveillance footage of the suspects that had been captured at the rooftop bar. They were described as being in their mid-20s with long dark hair, and one of them was reported as having a scorpion tattoo on her left thigh. Number 3. Aeolion Wallace. Arkansas woman Aeolion Wallace met a man on social media on June the 13th of 2022 and invited him to her home in Pine Bluff. The situation turned violent not long after his arrival, as the man tried to rob her. The unnamed assailant tasered Wallace in the neck before he started choking her, prompting her to brandish the gun she kept for protection. The man took the weapon off her, then started hitting her in the head with it until she gave him her wallet. The vicious attack left her with a broken nose, deep gashes on her forehead, and a severely swollen face. The damage Wallace had sustained was visible in an interview that the woman gave in the assault's aftermath. While speaking to the media, Wallace blamed herself for her ordeal and for letting a stranger into her home, urging other women, "Be careful who you talk to, do your research." She also stated an intention of leaving Arkansas for her home state of California. Number 2. Joseph Trevor. In the early hours of April the 20th of 2019, English teenagers Megan Newton and Joseph Trevor met at a taxi rank in Newcastle-under-Lyme. Earlier in the night, 18-year-old Newton had gone to the Kiln nightclub after finishing her shift at a chip shop. Trevor had been taken into custody by the police, who confiscated a bag of ketamine found in his possession. He was released and told he'd have to return at a later date. Suspicions about his rapid release would later be focused on the connection of his parents, who worked for Staffordshire Police. But they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing. Suspicions of interference persisted nonetheless and were enhanced by the fact that a few years prior, Trevor had been accused of abusing a teenager in a case that ended up not being prosecuted. Upon his chance meeting with Newton on April the 20th, Trevor claimed that he didn't want to go home to his parents in his state at the time, as he was severely intoxicated from drugs and alcohol. He was a semi-professional soccer player, and Newton was a junior soccer coach with aspirations of becoming a sports therapist. They went to the same school but were largely strangers to each other. In what would be deemed as an act of kindness, Newton invited Trevor to her apartment to sleep off his intoxication. CCTV cameras would capture them walking into her Stoke-on-Trent home shortly before 4 a.m. At some point in the hours that followed, Trevor repeatedly forced himself on Newton. After abusing the teenager, he strangled her and stabbed her in the back 9 times. He abandoned her on the bed, naked and splayed as she bled to death. He was then captured by CCTV, exiting Newton's home using her key, which he then discarded. Trevor's composure upon leaving the gruesome murder scene would be described as remarkably composed. He was arrested later that day after Newton's mutilated body was discovered. Trevor subsequently pleaded guilty to murder and another 2 counts stemming from the abuse, for which he was sentenced to a minimum term of 21 years and 65 days in prison on February the 17th of 2020. Number 1. James Squires. On February the 21st of 2019, an Englishwoman saw James Squires outside a shop in Evington, Leicester. She'd seen him begging on the street in the past and assumed he was homeless. It was a cold winter day, so the unnamed 45-year-old woman invited Squires to her home to warm up, offering him food, tea, and cider. They talked for a few hours, after which the woman asked Squires to leave so that she could go to bed. It was at that point that Squires, who'd posed as a rough sleeper but in fact had a home, ruthlessly attacked her. He punched the victim twice, rendering her unconscious. Squires then persisted to strike and stomp her with such force that he broke her jaw and ruptured her right eye, which later had to be surgically removed. The victim regained her senses to find that she was covered in blood and bruises. Squires, who it was later determined was a heroin addict, was arrested. The only explanation he subsequently provided was that he'd fallen asleep in the victim's home and woke up to her punching him because she wanted him out. He claimed that he exploded and attacked her continuously for 10 to 15 minutes. A judge, however, suspected that drugs and alcohol had affected his memory, eventually pleaded guilty to causing grievous bodily harm with intent, and was given a sentence of 7.5 years in prison. During an impact statement, his victim, who'd been fitted with a prosthetic eyeball, reported that she suffered from panic attacks and had become distrustful of people. On June the 16th of 2011, 22-year-old California woman Crystal Rodriguez was killed in a parasail accident that also left her husband fighting for his life. It was the last day of Crystal and Victor's honeymoon at Lucayan Beach in the Bahamas, and the couple were being towed by a speedboat with a parachute. The couple had bought a parasail ride with Ocean Motion Water Sports. All was going well, the chute bellowing behind the two. Without warning, their harness snapped, sending them plunging over 200 feet into the sea. The pair were rushed to a nearby hospital where Crystal was pronounced dead. Victor suffered a punctured lung and multiple broken bones. Without medical insurance, the man's extensive medical needs as well as the roughly $50,000 price tag on bringing Crystal's body home placed such a financial burden on the grieving families that they launched a crowdfunding campaign. Local authorities conducted an investigation into the malfunction and subsequent tragedy, the results of which never became clear. Number 21. Barney and Betty Hill. Betty and Barney Hill of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, were at the center of America's first widely publicized alien abduction account. The alleged abduction took place on September the 19th of 1961. while the couple were driving home from their honeymoon in Montreal. As they were passing through New Hampshire's White Mountains, they claimed to be followed by a spotlight. Upon pulling over, they reportedly spotted a ship floating above their vehicle. At some point, they lost consciousness, and when they subsequently came to, they said they were in their car miles down the road. They noticed that 2 hours had passed, and they couldn't even remember anything that had transpired within that period. When they got home, they found mysterious marks on their car. They also found that the zipper of Betty's dress was damaged, the dress riddled with mysterious stains, and Barney's binoculars were broken. The couple initially kept the story to themselves, but after experiencing nightmares and anxiety, they resorted to hypnosis to check if there were suppressed memories of the event. The hypnotist recorded the session during which Betty and Barney recalled boarding a saucer-like aircraft and were taken into separate rooms to be physically examined. According to the News Center Maine, the chilling recording features Betty revealing how terrified she was by the creatures and experience. Their story was later published, becoming a cornerstone of debate between believers and skeptics. Number 20. Hugh Grant and Anna Eberstein. While appearing on Late Night with Seth Meyers in June of 2018, 52-year-old actor Hugh Grant revealed that his wife, 39-year-old Anna Eberstein, was kidnapped by a furious taxi driver during their honeymoon in France. The couple had tied the knot a month earlier, then went to Paris for a wedding vacation. Grant told Seth that after jumping into a cab with Eberstein, he realized he had no cash to pay the $7 fare, and so he requested the driver to take them to a cash machine. The cash machine had an issue and couldn't give Grant the money he wanted to pay the driver. As such, Grant frantically instructed his wife to get out of the car. He also told the driver that they weren't able to pay because the machine didn't work. At this point, the driver became enraged and decided to leave the scene with Eberstein still in the car. Grant didn't reveal how the issue was resolved, but his wife eventually made it back to finish their honeymoon. He finished the story by noting that whenever he went to Paris, he'd always have a fight with a cab driver. Number 19. Timothy Lowe and Rashada Horsley. On July the 9th of 2017, Georgia couple Timothy Lowe and Rashada Horsley were accused of carjacking, kidnapping, and assaulting a woman in South Florida while on honeymoon in the Miami, Florida area. The incident occurred on July the 9th of 2017 when Lowe and Horsley approached a 28-year-old woman at a Publix parking lot in Hialeah. Horsley asked for directions, and as the woman lowered her window, the 32-year-old smacked her in the head. The blow was enough to knock the victim out cold. She told police the next thing she remembered was Horsley securing her in the car while Lowe drove. The latter reached back and gave her another slap at one point, but she retained consciousness this time. The woman added that she was continually threatened with a knife until they got to a room at a Motel 6. For several hours she was held at the inn against her will while Lowe and Horsley repeatedly forced themselves upon her. Lowe later forced her to text her mother and say everything was okay. The 37-year-old honeymooner subsequently took the woman's phone from her. At some point, Horsley became preoccupied. The victim took this chance to make a run for it despite being deprived of her clothes and forced to make her desperate escape in the buff. The following day, Miami police received a complaint about two suspects who'd entered a 7-Eleven store naked, poured soft drinks, and left without payment or any further interaction. Police found the pair about a block away enjoying their soft drinks without a stitch of clothing. The officers identified them as Lowe and Horsley and took them into custody. They quickly linked them to the attack on the woman. After a year, Lowe was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of several charges including burglary, kidnapping, carjacking, and assault, among others. Horsley was handed a 20-year sentence on May the 26th of 2021, with eligibility for parole after serving 15 years. She was convicted of burglary, assault, kidnapping, battery with no injury, and grand theft. These sentences were made possible by a clause in Florida law that hands down a harsh minimum penalty for assault committed in the course of a burglary and allows the possibility of a life sentence. The honeymooners essentially chose the worst possible place to commit their au naturel crime spree. Number 18. Aldo Vargas and Courtney Fraser. Due to a wildfire, In Lahaina, Hawaii, a California couple, Aldo Vargas and Courtney Fraser, went from honeymooning to figuring out how to escape the blaze. Following their wedding, Vargas and Fraser traveled to the nearby open country. But when they arrived at their hotel in Lahaina on August 7th of 2023, the weather quickly changed. Far-reaching wildfires began, during which smoke and flames could be seen from the couple's patio. They could see flames getting closer and closer. Moments later, the power failed and cell phones didn't work. Since there wasn't any food at the hotel because of the power outage, they had to stand in line at a grocery store to get food. Consequently, they decided to head to the airport in their rental car. Despite the main road being closed, they took another route, which ultimately allowed them to arrive at the airport safely and take a flight to Honolulu. On August 11th, the couple finally arrived in Oakland, California. Fraser later expressed her gratitude that she and Vargas made it out alive and that they still have a home, unlike those who lost everything in the fires. Number 17. John and Michaela McCreevy on January the 10th of 2011. 27-year-old Irish woman Michaela McCreevy was found strangled in the bath of a hotel room in Mauritius, Africa, where she'd traveled for her honeymoon. Michaela and her husband John had lunch at their hotel in Grand Gorby on the day in question, after which she went to her room to get biscuits. Investigators believed she was wrestled to the ground upon entering her room and strangled. She was then put into the bath. Soon after, her body was discovered by her husband. John found Michaela unconscious in the bath with the tap running. He took her out of the bath, laid her on the floor, and then tried to revive her, but was unsuccessful. Within hours of making the horrific discovery, he was arrested, handcuffed, strip-searched, and left alone in a police interview room for 5 hours. The Daily Mail reported that as the man wept over the loss of his wife, an officer told him, "What are you crying for? You're young, you'll get another wife." John was eventually released from custody after detectives eliminated him as a suspect. It was ultimately confirmed that he was at the restaurant at the time of the murder. 3 employees of the hotel were later arrested for the murder, as well as 2 security officers for aiding and abetting a crime. They were all later cleared of the allegations after a DNA test made by a forensic expert from England found no DNA traces of the suspects were present on the body or at the crime scene. 13 years later, there were still no new leads in the case. It remained to be seen if the Mauritius police force would ever get to the bottom of the murder, but their endless mistakes during the initial investigation could mean Michaela's killer would never face justice. The mistakes included allowing hotel guests and staff to trample over the crime scene, zeroing in on the wrong suspects multiple times, and not requiring officers to wear anti-contamination suits as they worked in the room. Number 16. Dalton and Cheyenne Cottrell. I felt everything yet nothing all at the same time, said Iowa woman Cheyenne Cottrell as she referred to hearing that her husband was gone 3 days after their wedding. Cheyenne and Dalton had gotten married on July the 27th of 2019. 3 days later, they were honeymooning near Crescent Beach, Florida, when they decided to take a dip in the ocean. Cheyenne said that they began with just their ankles in the water because she wanted Dalton to become used to the ocean, as he'd only ever been in a lake before. They went in a little further, laughing and having fun, until a wave hit and startled the man. As Dalton began to panic, another wave took him out further to where the water was at shoulder height. He went into full panic, pulling under Cheyenne, who was trying to help him. Cheyenne quickly fought to get back to the surface, trying to speak calmly and explain what they needed to do. She spotted a lifeguard nearby and began yelling for help. The lifeguard responded quickly, but still needed to swim a great distance to reach the pier. As Cheyenne was trying to help her husband, Dalton held her hair and pulled her under for a second time. The woman freed herself by pushing her husband away and telling him to hold on to her ankles as she tried to stay afloat. Dalton let go and looked into Cheyenne's eyes, then said simply, "I'm tired. The 22-year-old lost consciousness and went under. They were both eventually brought to the shore and transported to the hospital, where Dalton was pronounced dead. Cheyenne was interviewed by police and detectives, determined that everything was a freak accident. On August the 10th of 2019, instead of starting her new life with Dalton, she was standing at his funeral. She later posted on Facebook, "Never did I think at 22 would I be a wife and then a widow so quickly." Number 15. Brad and Lestari Williams. A rogue wave in the Indonesian island of Nusa Penida, Bali, created what the 9 News called a holiday nightmare for Australian couple Brad and Lestari Williams. The pair, hailing from Two Rocks, Perth, had gotten married in Australia in 2015 but travelled to Bali in May of 2016 to celebrate a traditional Balinese wedding. In the wake of the ceremony, Lestari and Brad were honeymooning. Shortly after 5 p.m. on June the 2nd of 2016, they took a walk along the rocks at a natural infinity pool at Angels Billabong Beach. They were with Lestari's Balinese family when a massive wave hit them from behind. The family was separated as the wave swept them out to sea. Luckily, 40-year-old Brad made it back to shore with only minor injuries. However, 24-year-old Lestari and her sister were nowhere to be found. After nearly 24 hours of searching for the victims, it was only the lifeless body of Lestari that was recovered by police. Lestari's corpse had washed up in the beachside region of Manggis, on the main island of Indonesia, which was approximately 12 miles from where she'd been swept away. An expert in coastal processes told National Geographic that the dangerous wave conditions in Bali at the time were the result of persistent large swell waves generated from a strong cyclone in the Southern Ocean off Western Australia. The beach where the incident occurred is reportedly one of the most Instagrammable spots on the island, but was one of the most dangerous places to be during the tidal phenomenon that took place. Number 14. Robbie and Marina Morgan. The case involving Robbie Morgan, who is charged with the death of his newlywed bride on Australia's Hamilton Island, could go to trial in April of 2024. The 30-year-old was accused of driving without due care and crashing a golf buggy his wife, 29-year-old Marina, had occupied with him, causing her death. The tragedy occurred on June the 20th of 2022, 10 days after the couple got married. Court records stated that Robbie had attempted a U-turn on the corner of Coral Sea Avenue and Whit Sunday Boulevard, and as a result, their buggy rolled. Marina didn't wear a seatbelt and fell from the vehicle onto the road, sustaining life-threatening injuries. As she was immediately in cardiac arrest, bystanders, including an off-duty firefighter and doctors, attempted to save the woman at the scene for 35 minutes but were unsuccessful. A Queensland police inspector said the death was a tragic accident and added that there was no indication of alcohol or dangerous driving. As of the latest updates, Robbie is facing charges of driving without due care and detention, using a mobile phone while driving, failing to wear a seatbelt as a driver, and passengers 16 years of age or older failing to wear approved seatbelts. Subsequent information indicated that he entered a plea of not guilty to causing his wife's death. Number 13. Jamie Carsey and Mary Somerville. After a suspected carbon monoxide leak at a holiday home in Spain on May the 6th of 2023, 40-year-old Jamie Carsey died in his sleep, and his wife, 39-year-old Mary Somerville, was left terminally ill and passed away soon after. The newlyweds from Edinburgh, Scotland, had been on a post-nuptial vacation, staying at a family-owned house in the Cala Mesquita resort located in Mallorca, Spain. Carsey and Somerville had been due to go out on a boat trip, and when they failed to show up, their friends raised the alarm with local police. Responding emergency services discovered the couple in each other's arms. Local authorities believe that they might have been poisoned by a broken fridge in their holiday accommodation. Initial investigations revealed that the gas leak had occurred due to a fault with the refrigerator and took place during the night as the couple slept with all the windows in the house closed. While Carsey was pronounced dead, Somerville was rushed to Manor Hospital and admitted to an intensive care unit. She was later transferred to St. Columba's Hospice in Edinburgh. The unfortunate widow ultimately passed away on July the 2nd of 2023. Number 12. Nate and Mariana Kuhlman. Nate and Mariana Kuhlman's Caribbean honeymoon ended in tragedy when the former was killed in a freak water skiing accident a couple of days after they tied the knot. The couple from Steubenville, Ohio, were married on October the 28th of 2023. They traveled to St. Lucia for their honeymoon, where Nate died in the accident 3 days later on October the 31st. The subsequent post-mortem conducted confirmed the cause of the 23-year-old's death as drowning. Although the specific details of the incident hadn't been disclosed, Nate's mother, Heather, expressed her profound grief and deep appreciation for the support they received online. In the aftermath, 2 GoFundMe pages raised about $108,000, which would cover various expenses that Nate's family has encountered during this devastating time. Number 11. Tim and Monica O'Connor. On March the 26th of 2016, British woman Monica O'Connor was on her honeymoon with her husband Tim when a boat they were on capsized and killed her. The 28-year-old was among dozens of tourists traveling off the coast of Thailand's Koh Samui amid strong winds and rough waters. The group was allegedly not given any safety briefing on board, and they were told to only wear life jackets when snorkeling or kayaking. According to the senior coroner for South Manchester, the captain accelerated through the waves, sailing too close to the shore, and the boat did not have enough life jackets for all of the passengers on board. The boat was tipped upside down after it was hit by a wave. Tim frantically swam down and out of the boat, searching for Monica. He later reached land where a woman told him she'd seen his wife. Tim went to the hospital hoping to reunite with his wife, but upon his arrival, he was asked to identify her body. Aside from Monica, 3 other travelers were killed in the accident, including 46-year-old Jason Parnell, who was celebrating his first wedding anniversary with his wife Pooja on the vessel. Jason's body was initially nowhere to be found, but a couple of days later, it was discovered trapped among rocks. The South Manchester Coroner's Court later heard that at the time of the ordeal, officials had warned small boats not to sail. Ultimately, boat captain Sanan Sridakiao was sentenced to a year behind bars, and operator limited partnership Ang Thong Discovery Tour was fined $440. Number 10. Brian and Alison Gray. In April of 2016, 33-year-old Englishwoman Alison Gray had hoped to spend her wedding trip relaxing with her new husband, Brian, but instead suffered injuries that required stitches, bandages, and a wheelchair. The incident took place at a beach resort in Marmaris, Turkey. Alison said that she and her 39-year-old partner were both adrenaline junkies, so they decided to try out the hotel's U-shaped water slide. The couple rode the slide in a double dinghy and subsequently slowed to a halt at the bottom. As Alison was walking off the slide, the next dinghy, being ridden by another couple, came hurtling towards her. The crash sent her flying head over heels before smashing down onto the slide. The woman was rushed to Ahu Hastanesi Hospital, where she was given tests and x-rays. She was also given 7 stitches in her chin and shin, bandaged up, and placed in a wheelchair. Although Alison missed all the romantic activities she'd planned with Brian, she eventually recovered from her non-fatal injuries. Alison said that the excursion, which was supposed to be a trip of a lifetime, became a nightmare instead. Number 9. Lewis Bennett and Isabella Hellman. In May of 2017, Lewis Bennett and Isabella Hellman, both in their early 40s, were honeymooning in the Florida Straits on Bennett's catamaran. They'd been sailing to the US coast from Cuba. Bennett told the Coast Guard that he was sleeping below deck when the vessel struck something in the darkness. He then discovered that Hellman, his wife and mother to his young daughter, had disappeared from the helm of the sinking catamaran. However, the authorities discovered evidence that it had been scuttled intentionally, through holes deliberately drilled in its hull. Hellman's body was never found, in spite of Bennett's claims that she'd been wearing a life jacket, even though he claimed to be devastated by the loss of his partner. There was nothing to indicate that he had made any efforts to look for her. He didn't fire flares to illuminate the water or activate the vessel's electronic homing device. It was only after 45 minutes, and when he was already on the life raft, that he radioed for help. Coast Guards also found him with a trove of silver coins worth over $40,000 that he'd previously reported stolen from his employer. It also emerged that the couple had been bickering over their finances, and that Hellman had no idea how her partner earned his money. Prosecutors initially accused Bennett of murdering his wife to put an end to their marital strife and inherit her wealth. He ultimately pled guilty to the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 years in a U.S. prison. Number 8. Sven Fouché and Chantel Bayer. In 2013, newlyweds Sven Fouché and Chantel Bayer were on a trip to the Aloe Ridge Game Reserve near Johannesburg, South Africa. The honeymooners went on a safari and encountered a group of rhinos. The wildlife expert accompanying them encouraged Fouché and Bayer to stand closer to the animals for a photo. They were both smiling for the camera, with their backs turned to them. Fouché would subsequently recall the fear he'd seen in the wildlife expert's eyes after he'd taken the photo. Fouché turned around and saw that the rhino was right behind them. Moments later, 24-year-old Bayer was gored and flung several feet into the air after the rhino's horn had penetrated her chest from behind. She survived the attack, but it had left her with injuries to her shoulder, several broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. Number 7. Stephen and Jeffany Kramer. In 2018, U.S. Navy veteran Stephen Kramer disappeared during a honeymoon vacation to Hawaii. Stephen and his wife Jeffany were staying at a resort in Kunakakai, Molokai. They'd arrived on September the 9th, the day after their wedding. 9 days later, Stephen, who was an avid hiker, started exploring the area for a trail that they could go on together. In the afternoon, he texted Jeffany that he was on his way back but never returned. A search party was mounted for the 27-year-old after his wife reported him missing. The rescue effort was complicated by the fact that Stephen's phone was either turned off or had run out of battery, meaning the authorities couldn't track it. 4 days after his disappearance had been reported, Stephen's body was found in Pier Gulch, about half a mile from the resort. It was at the bottom of a 150-foot drop off a cliff, with a freshly fallen boulder next to him. Investigators determined that he hadn't been crushed by the massive rock. The most likely scenario was that he'd leaned against it to look over the edge, at which point smaller rocks beneath it began to crumble, thus triggering the collapse and causing Stephen to fall over the edge as well. Number 6. Christine Fensom and Andy Bennett. In September of 2016, British woman Christine Fensom died during a dream honeymoon to Cancun, Mexico. The mother of 3 had lost her first husband to a hit-and-run in 2004. She'd struggled to cope with his passing for years until she met Andy Bennett. They had become romantically involved, and after tying the knot on September the 17th, the couple left for South America. While there, 54-year-old Fensom woke up one night feeling terribly ill, with symptoms that included diarrhea, weakness, and what her husband described as funny sounds coming from her throat. She was rushed to a hospital where she passed away from heart failure within 10 minutes of arrival. It was later determined that she'd suffered fatal ciguatoxin poisoning from eating contaminated fish. The illness, called ciguatera, is triggered by toxins found on algae in various reef ecosystems around the world, including the Gulf of Mexico. It's consumed by smaller fish, which in turn are predated upon by larger species, such as barracudas or groupers. It's believed that Fensom had eaten a grouper, which had the poison in its system. Ciguatoxin can't be destroyed by conventional cooking and has no specific taste or smell. As the most common form of seafood poisoning, ciguatera is rarely lethal, but there's no treatment once it sets in. Number 5. Mohammed Malik and Noor Shah. In the fall of 2020, a newlywed Manhattan couple died while vacationing in the Caribbean after they were caught in a strong riptide. 4 days after they'd had their wedding in Long Island, 26-year-old Mohammed Malik and his bride, Noor Shah, aged 29, were at a Turks and Caicos Islands resort. According to witnesses, they'd been swimming in chest-deep water when they were pulled away by the current. They tried hard to fight it but were swiftly dragged underwater. Bystanders intervened and succeeded in bringing them to shore, where they performed CPR. Unfortunately, the couple, both respected members of New York's Pakistani-American community, were pronounced dead at the scene. In the aftermath, Malik's father was critical of the resort for not putting up signs to warn tourists about the potential dangers. Number 4. William and Blakely Harrell. In November of 2020, a newlywed NASCAR crew member and his wife were killed in a brutal car crash in the Florida Keys. 30-year-old William Rowdy Harrell and his wife Blakely, 23, had married on November the 21st in their native Alabama. William, who'd worked in the pit crew of Hendrick Motorsports for 8 seasons, was also a former college linebacker for the Alabama Crimson Tide. He was behind the wheel of a 2020 Toyota Corolla as the couple was on their way to honeymoon in Florida 4 days after their wedding. He was northbound on US 1 when he crossed the center line and into the path of a Ford F-250 pickup truck. The other driver had tried to avoid the couple's vehicle, but they collided head-on. William and Blakely died at the scene. The driver of the oncoming vehicle only sustained minor injuries, while his 2 passengers were in a more serious condition, but the extent remains unclear. A toxicology report performed by the Florida Highway Patrol found alcohol and marijuana in William's system, which may have contributed to the accident. Number 3. Ben and Catherine Milani. In 2008, on the last day of a 2-week honeymoon to Antigua, a Welsh couple was robbed and then executed. At around 5 a.m., other guests from the luxurious Coco's Hotel reported hearing gunfire. After intruders had broken into their room, Catherine Milani and her husband Ben were forced to kneel beside their bed. The couple, both 31, was then shot in the back of the head. Catherine died instantly, while Ben fell in a coma and was flown back to Swansea. About a week after the shooting, he too passed away. The couple's phones, cash, and a camera were among the items stolen from the room. Avi Howell and Canel Martin were subsequently arrested and charged with murder. They were located after SIM cards registered to them were activated in the stolen phones. The men were also found guilty of killing 43-year-old shopkeeper Juanetta Anderson. It took a jury only 10 hours to convict them to life in prison. The honeymoon killings, as the media had dubbed them, shocked the nation of Antigua, which up to that point had a great reputation as a holiday destination. A few years later, Howie and an accomplice, who'd reportedly been incarcerated for fraud, escaped from prison. They cut through a wire fence and scaled a 30-foot-high wall. The police later confronted the 24-year-old fugitive at a rural parish just south of the capital. He was shot in the knees and later succumbed to his injuries. Number 2. Shrien and Annie Dewani. A few weeks after their wedding in 2010, Shrien and Annie Dewani were honeymooning in South Africa. They'd spent 4 days on safari in the Kruger National Park before arriving at a 5-star hotel in Cape Town. After spending most of their Saturday lounging at the luxurious resort's pool, they decided to explore the city later in the evening. After an hour and a half of being driven around in a local taxi and taking in the sights, they opted to leave the safer tourist area to have a look at a township a few miles away. They were stopped at a junction in Guguletu by 2 armed men. One of them tried to use his weapon to smash through the driver's window. The attackers pulled the driver out, then took off with the couple still in the taxi. They took Shrien and Annie's valuables but claimed that they only wanted the vehicle and weren't going to hurt them. They later threw Shrien out of the car and drove off with Annie. After being left alone in the middle of the township, Shrien convinced a local man to call the police. The authorities drove around with Shrien in the car but were unsuccessful in locating the attackers. On Sunday morning, Annie's body was found abandoned in the taxi in a different township. She'd been abused and shot at least 3 times. A long legal battle ensued in which the suspects tried to paint Shrien as the mastermind of a murder-for-hire plot targeting his wife. The allegations made global headlines but were ultimately discredited, with Shrien deemed innocent by a South African court in 2014. It was discovered that the hijacking hadn't been random, but planned by the taxi driver, Zola Tongo, working in cahoots with the hijackers, Mzimwa Madoda Kwabe and Zolil Ngeni. Tongo and Kwabe were given sentences of 18 and 25 years respectively, while Ngeni was sentenced to life in prison. If you still haven't seen our first video on when honeymoons go wrong, then stay tuned till after number 1, as we got that coming right up. Number 1. Ralph and Crystal Jankers. In 2019, a newlywed German man faced manslaughter charges after fatally perforating his wife's bowel during a prolonged lovemaking session. 49-year-old Crystal Jankers died only days after walking down the aisle with Ralph, aged 52, in Krefeld, a city in North Rhine-Westphalia. Instead of going on a traditional honeymoon, the couple opted to celebrate their marriage with a 48-hour bondage session. It was during this time that Ralph used a spiked 8-inch hook on Crystal. When the adult toy was removed, it perforated a woman's bowel. Ralph called the emergency services 4 days later, but paramedics were unable to save her. When questioned why he hadn't sought help for his wife sooner, Ralph claimed that he didn't understand how serious her condition was, as she'd complained about stomach discomfort in the past. A self-confessed sadomasochist, he told the authorities that everything that occurred between him and Crystal had been consensual, adding, "It was our honeymoon period." According to the woman's adult son, whom described her as mentally unstable, Ralph had abused her in the past. He believed that the violence and humiliation extended past the consensual confines of the bedroom, but affirmed the belief that Crystal did indeed love her husband. A court determined that Ralph had been grossly negligent but found no grounds for a manslaughter charge. Ralph was given a suspended sentence for grievous bodily harm and left the court a free man. On October the 18th of 2020, Julie De La Garza was a passenger in a truck driven by her boyfriend down Northwest Freeway near Spring Cypress, Texas. As reported by the Harris County Sheriff's Office, they were spotted in traffic by De La Garza's ex-boyfriend, Man Austin Hayes. He began following them and eventually pulled up behind their vehicle. Hayes fired at the couple through the back window of the truck, and a bullet struck 20-year-old De La Garza in the head. The authorities initially believed that the shooting had been a road rage incident. Photos from the scene shared by the Cy-Fair Fire Department showed the area being taped off as first responders tended to De La Garza. She was rushed to an ER clinic, from which she was taken to Memorial Hermann Hospital by life flight in critical condition. The following day, De La Garza's family announced that she'd succumbed to her injuries. By the time that the authorities arrived on location, Hayes had abandoned his white Toyota in a parking lot and fled on foot. A manhunt was launched and he surrendered to the police within days of the shooting. His initial charges of aggravated assault were upgraded to murder. His bail was set at $250,000 after a judge discovered that Hayes was on probation for an assault that had occurred in March of that same year. Hayes had strict release conditions upon his bail being secured. They included being GPS monitored, adhering to a curfew, surrendering his passport, and having no contact with the victim's family or boyfriend. Number 6. Zoe Hopkins. Welsh woman Zoe Hopkins was jailed for 18 months in the summer of 2022 after brutally attacking a female acquaintance out of jealous rage. The 36-year-old, who was reported as being intoxicated at the time, waited for the victim to return to her Carmarthen apartment complex on February the 15th of that year. Hopkins followed her to the block's communal area, tackled her from behind and threw her to the ground. She then grabbed the unnamed 28-year-old victim's head and repeatedly smashed it against some steps. The woman was able to get away, but Hopkins chased her down to her flat and launched another attack. While holding the victim by her hair, Hopkins kicked her in the head and accused her of texting her boyfriend. The battered woman was eventually able to escape to a neighbor's apartment and called the police. She had been left with a number of injuries in the form of bruises and cuts, but opted not to seek medical help. Hopkins was arrested and a few months later pleaded guilty to assault occasioning actual bodily harm. She had over a dozen prior convictions, a number of which were for violence, with the most recent being a 2019 battery charge. Number 5. Olowia Kopanczyk. In June of 2018, Olowia Kopanczyk and her boyfriend, Nigel Simper, were on a Great Western Railway train from Cheltenham to London Paddington. The train had barely departed when the couple started arguing and were approached by a worker who asked if they were all right and who was told by Simper that they were not. Later on in their trip, Simper was seen shouting and bleeding from a 2-inch laceration to his forehead. It would emerge that Kopanczyk had thrown a bottle of Desperados beer at her boyfriend's head because he'd been talking to his ex on the phone. As blood started pouring on his face, Simper reportedly told his partner, "What have you done? You bottled me. You will do time for this." The woman was arrested and charged with assault, occasioning actual bodily harm. She subsequently admitted throwing the bottle during her trial, but claimed to have done so in self-defense. Kopanczyk reported that Simper was disrespecting her while loudly talking on the phone with his ex-girlfriend. The woman told the court, "He was laughing at my face, telling her that I am stupid." She claimed that she tried to take the phone away from Simper, who then punched her with the heel of his hand. Kopanczyk also stated that her boyfriend, whom she accused of having taken cocaine at the time, kicked her when she tried to get up, which ultimately prompted her to hit him with the bottle. The woman's trial was still ongoing, according to subsequent information released to the media. Number 4. Chantel Connolly. a former star of the British reality TV series Geordie Shore, was convicted in the summer of 2017 of punching a woman outside a Newcastle nightclub. Chantel Connolly and the victim had reportedly met in the VIP area of a bar called Bijou in October of the previous year. They were part of a larger group, and the 22-year-old unnamed woman had recognized Connolly from the show, of which she'd reportedly been an avid watcher. After chatting and dancing together, the group moved to another venue on Stowell Street. While there, 27-year-old Connolly became jealous over a relationship she believed the woman had had with her ex-boyfriend, Tommy Sayers. The former reality star repeatedly asked if she'd gone with Tommy. It would emerge that the victim did know the man, but hadn't seen him since her late teens. Bouncers reportedly intervened in the dispute, and the woman walked away with two of her friends. Later on, before they could get into the Powerhouse nightclub, they were met outside by Connolly, who demanded to see her phone and check for proof that there was nothing going on between her and Sayers. Connolly found nothing to confirm her suspicions. Nevertheless, as the other woman headed towards a taxi, she charged and punched her in the face. The victim was knocked backwards and fell to the pavement. She was left with a broken wrist and a split lip that required stitches to mend. Connolly was arrested and vehemently denied the assault, claiming she hadn't been anywhere near the nightclub where the attack had occurred. The victim's version of events was ultimately accepted by the court, and Connolly was found guilty of grievous bodily harm. She was ordered to pay the plaintiff £2,500, in addition to being given a 12-month community order and 200 hours of unpaid work. Number 3. Leah Hanlon. On November the 26th of 2022, Leah Hanlon, aged 23, invited her ex-boyfriend to her home in the suburb of Cathays, in the Welsh capital of Cardiff. They'd been separated for 7 weeks, and Hanlon had grown angry, thinking her former partner had been talking to other women. The man showed her his phone to attest that he hadn't done so, but in a fit of jealous rage, Hanlon successively struck him in the head with a bottle of Smirnoff Ice and an ashtray, both of which shattered on impact. The woman then followed her ex as he fled to a neighbor's downstairs apartment. She stabbed him with a knife under his right armpit. The blade punctured his chest cavity, and the victim suffered a collapsed lung. He was rushed to the hospital, where his chest was drained so that the damage to his lung could be mended. The man suffered life-threatening compression to the heart, windpipe, and major blood vessels, but eventually fully recovered. Following her arrest, Hanlon pleaded guilty to wounding and was sent to prison for 15 months. Number 2. Aaron Williams. On March the 23rd of 2019, Jessica Gittins was a maid of honor at her sister's wedding in Newport, Wales. Accompanying her was her boyfriend, Aaron Williams, who was reported to have been drinking heavily during the event. Upon returning to the home of Gittins' mother in Aberbargod, Williams accused his partner of flirting with other men during the reception. The couple, both in their early 20s at the time, were still in the clothes they'd worn at the wedding when Williams savagely beat his partner during what was reported as a 90-minute ordeal. The man repeatedly kicked Gittins in the hips, which he reportedly knew were fragile, as she'd had multiple operations after dislocating them as a child. Looking back on the attack, Gittins would remember begging him to stop, but Williams wouldn't relent. The man, whom she described as being in a demonic state, stomped on her head with such force that her tooth was chipped and she was left with shoe prints on her face. He then threw a lava lamp at her head, struck her in the rib area, and pulled out a clump of her hair. After the prolonged assault that caused Gittins to fear for her life, Williams apologized, said he loved her, and tried to take her away in a taxi so that her family wouldn't see what had happened. The woman refused, and she was later taken to a hospital with a jaw injury as well as multiple cuts and bruises across her body. Williams was arrested and tried to claim that he'd acted in self-defense because Gittins had tried to scratch him. During his trial, he admitted causing actual bodily harm and was handed a suspended sentence as well as a restraining order in June of 2020. However, in the years that followed the incident, Williams repeatedly violated the restraining order through several incidents. They included calling the woman from an unknown number and adopting an accent in a failed attempt of disguising his voice, stalking her and sitting across from her on the train. Williams pleaded guilty to multiple counts of breaching the order in 2023, but was spared jail time once more, as the judge deemed there was still hope for him to be rehabilitated. Number 1. Alicia Oakley. Reese Tyler, Alicia Oakley, and several of their friends were drinking together at an apartment in Dover, England in October of 2018. At some point during the evening, Oakley tried to kiss Tyler, but he reportedly spurned her advances. The man ended up sleeping with another woman from the party in a nearby room. Overcome with jealous rage, 19-year-old Oakley then charged Tyler and plunged a knife into the back of his head. The blade missed his brain by less than an inch. The man was taken to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother Hospital in Margate, where his scalp wound was treated with surgical glue. Oakley was arrested and underwent a mental health evaluation, during the course of which she was diagnosed with emotional instability disorder. In 2022, she pleaded guilty to wounding with intent, and the judge agreed with the conclusion of mental health experts, who determined that she'd suffered a psychotic episode at the time of the attack on Tyler. She was spared jail time and instead given a 2-year jail sentence, suspended for 18 months. Tyler subsequently stated that the sentence had been too lenient. He reported that psychological trauma from the knife attack had left him with anxiety around women and that he still suffered from dizziness that affected his work and ability to play with his daughter. A man from Des Moines, Iowa, was arrested on New Year's Day 2019 following a bizarre attack at a Quick Trip. At around 3 a.m., the Des Moines Police Department received a call from a cashier who reported that he was being chased around the store by a man who was subsequently identified as 26-year-old Rogelio Tapia. The latter threw several items at the worker, causing $1,000 in damages to the store in the process. Among the products Tapia had weaponized was also a banana, which he'd used to assault the clerk. Responding officers arrested Tapia on charges of assault on persons in certain occupations, simple assault, interference with official acts, and third-degree criminal mischief. The situation's ridiculousness became the inspiration for a meme, which the Des Moines Police Department later posted on its Facebook page. It showed a photo of 2 straight-faced officers, presumably the pair who'd responded to the incident, and it was captioned, "That face you make when you're being sent to help a man being assaulted with a banana." Number 7. Grocery store incident. In the summer of 2023, a woman went on a rampage inside a grocery store somewhere in the US while fully naked. Footage captured by distraught employees showed her rummaging through the store, damaging items and smearing cake frosting on her naked body. She also threw pastries on the floor and smashed beer bottles. One employee was recorded saying, "Why is no one doing anything? Help!" At some point, the woman calmly went behind the bakery counter, where she continued smothering her hair and legs with cake frosting. Another worker was captured saying, "We can't do anything. The cops are on their way." It remained unclear what charges the woman faced or what her reasons had been for the store rampage. Number 6. Jenna Manley. 36-year-old Australian woman Jenna Manley went bananas at the Monkey Bar in Mandurah, roughly 40 miles south of Perth, during a singles night on Valentine's Day 2023. Manley was reportedly wearing a wedding ring, was heavily intoxicated, and according to witness statements, was hitting on a bunch of men. They were reported to have unanimously rejected her advances. Staff asked Manley to leave multiple times, and the woman eventually went berserk, striking the venue's manager in the head with her stiletto heel. She then got into her red Ford Mustang and rammed it 3 to 4 times into the bar's entrance. The vehicular attack was captured on surveillance cameras and cell phone footage from terrified staff and patrons. Manley briefly got out of the Mustang, threw up her middle fingers and yelled, "F you!" before speeding away. Local law enforcement followed the trail of destruction to the woman's home. Manley was captured on video as she was arrested in her driveway, roughly 6 miles from the bar. She was charged with 6 offenses, including common assault, reckless driving, unlawful act or omission with intent to harm, and criminal damage or destruction of property. Through her lawyer, the woman claimed that her behavior had stemmed from her drink being spiked at the Monkey Bar. Number 5. Hae-Jung Shin. In January of 2023, New Jersey woman Hae-Jung Shin was arrested after pretending to be a freshman at New Brunswick High School and attending classes for 4 days. 29-year-old Shin provided the school district a fake birth certificate in order to enroll. Before she was discovered and arrested, Shin spent several days at the high school where she was seen in the classroom and walking the halls. The woman even texted a number of female students asking them to hang out at Commercial District, but none of them took her up on the offer. One student reported that she started acting weird with them. In the aftermath, suspicions began to arise after Shin was unclear regarding the identity of her legal guardians and failed to provide necessary documentation. The ruse further unraveled when she was prevented from signing out of school due to her supposed minor status, at which point the frustrated woman revealed her real age. She was eventually arrested and charged with 1 count of providing a false government document. Her purpose for the fake identity scheme remained unclear at first, but her behavior led many to suspect that she wasn't fully in charge of her mental faculties. Several New Brunswick high school students reported that they didn't feel safe at school anymore, and some feared that Shin had been aiming to lure them into human trafficking. However, it emerged in court that the woman had actually been trying to relive her high school days. Shin, a South Korean national, had traveled to the US alone in her mid-teens to attend a private boarding school. Her defense lawyer argued that she was lonely and missed the school atmosphere, which led to her enrolling at New Brunswick High School. Prior to the ruse, she went through a bitter divorce, was unemployed, and was being sued by her landlord after falling roughly $20,000 behind on rent payments. Shin admitted that she'd made a mistake and ultimately avoided jail time. According to updates from May of 2023, she was ordered to take a mental health test, pay fines, and had the option of enrolling in a pretrial program. Number 4. John Manley. In February of 2020, English digger driver John Manley was jailed for 5 years and 4 months at Liverpool Crown Court for leaving what was described as a trail of destruction at the Travel Lodge construction site where he'd been employed in January of 2019. As construction was nearing completion, Manley threatened his site manager that he would damage the building if he wasn't paid what he was due. The 36-year-old was reportedly owed £600 in wages and hadn't received any money over the Christmas period, which reportedly resulted in him being unable to spend time with his children. The site manager believed that Manley was making empty threats, and thinking he would diffuse the digger driver's anger, he bought him a sandwich and made him a cup of tea. 2 hours after a meeting, on January the 21st, Manley got into the digger and plowed through the hotel's front doors. He destroyed the ceiling, wiring, and structure of the buildings. As colleagues recorded him and pleaded with him to stop, Manley refused to do so, allegedly shouting from the digger, "All you had to do was pay me." Footage of the rampage went viral, and Manley was reported to have caused nearly £500,000 in damage. He was arrested and subsequently pleaded guilty to damaging property and being reckless as to whether life was endangered. Number 3. Trevian Kuti. 51-year-old Trevian Kuti, the former publicist of hip-hop and fashion mogul Kanye West, went viral on August 25th of 2023 after her mugshot was posted online. According to jail records from Fulton County, Georgia, Kuti was charged with violating the state's Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, conspiracy to carry out solicitation of false writings and statements, in addition to influencing witnesses. The allegations stemmed from the Chicago-based publicist's efforts to overturn the 2020 United States presidential election in Donald Trump's favor. 18 other suspects were charged following an official investigation. Kuti was pictured staring into the camera with her head tilted forward, eyebrows raised, and baring her teeth in an ear-to-ear smile. Netizens labeled her demeanor as creepy, with some comparing it to that of Pennywise, the clown from Stephen King's horror classic It. Others wrote that Kuti looked like a real-life jump scare or like she was in need of exorcism. The woman was accused of visiting Fulton County election worker Ruby Freeman at her Cobb County home in January of 2021, pretending to be a crisis manager. Cootie pressured Freeman into falsely admitting to have participated in election fraud, threatening her to bring people to her house if she didn't confess. Cootie was recorded as telling the election worker, "I cannot say what specifically will take place. I just know that it will disrupt your freedom and the freedom of one or more of your family members." Today's topic was inspired by Donnie Higgins 823. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Stuart Williamson. Englishman Stuart Williamson met his partner Diane Douglas in 1986, and the couple went on to work together for 35 years at the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust. As reported by those familiar with their relationship, Williams was a creep and a womanizer who'd left Douglas multiple times for other women throughout their relationship. She, however, took him back every time. Colleagues at the NHS Trust, where Williamson worked in a managerial capacity, described the man as a narcissistic sociopath with a very big ego who exhibited total disdain towards patients. Williamson and Douglas's relationship broke down in 2011, 4 years after the woman was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. By 2016, she was retired and impaired due to her condition, which affected her ability to walk and talk. At the time, she was back living with Williamson in a rented farmhouse in Colton, near Norwich. In December of 2018, while they were both sitting in the garden, Williamson grabbed a log and bashed Douglas's head multiple times until she was dead. He then placed her body in a wheelbarrow and took it to the garage before burying it in the garden. During the 19 months that followed, Williamson used Douglas's phone to send messages to the woman's family, maintaining the illusion that she was alive. He texted them on holidays and birthdays, in addition to making plans to meet before cancelling at the last minute. The man, who was at the time in his mid-50s, pocketed Douglas's NHS pension, disability benefits and savings. Bank records showed him transferring vast sums from her account to his. Williamson, who'd been released from his job in 2012, used Douglas's money to fund a lavish lifestyle. Social media photos showed him playing cricket and vacationing in tropical destinations in the aftermath of her death, while describing himself as happily retired. One Facebook selfie showed the man seemingly with a fresh tan as he was chomping down on a cigar. He was eventually arrested in November of 2021 after one of Douglas's relatives alerted the police. Williamson admitted to his partner's killing, telling officers he must have picked up a log and hit her with it, but claimed to have no memory of the attack. He then took the police to the place where he'd buried Douglas. Williamson would intentionally avoid facing justice from his partner's murder, as he was found dead while on remand on December the 29th of 2021. If you thought these stories couldn't get crazy enough, then you won't believe what we've got in store for you in When Surprises Go Wrong. Coming up right after number 1. Number 1. Bryant Rivera. 30-year-old Bryant Rivera, a resident of Downey, California, was arrested on July the 6th of 2023 in the US as he was suspected of having killed exotic dancer Angela Carolina Acosta Flores during a trip to Mexico. The woman had been strangled to death and her body was found at the Las Cascadas Hotel in Tijuana in January of 2022. She was reported to have met Rivera at her workplace, the Hong Kong Gentlemen's Club, which was close to the hotel where her body was found. Flores sometimes also worked as an escort, and she texted her mother that she was taking a client to a room at the hotel at around 10:15 p.m. on January the 24th. Her mother texted her back half an hour later, but received no answer. When 20-year-old Flores' boyfriend went to the bar in the early hours of January the 25th, staff told him that Flores had left with a gringo named Bryant Rivera. The duo was captured on Las Cascadas security cameras entering the building. When Flores' boyfriend and mother went to the hotel's reception for further information, they learned that she'd been killed. As indicated by border control records, Rivera crossed into the US through the San Isidro port of entry on foot shortly after midnight on January the 25th, Once he was arrested in the US and with extradition proceedings commencing, law enforcement in Mexico revealed that Rivera was a suspect in the killing of at least 2 other dancers from the Hong Kong club before and after he targeted Flores, as reported by Zeta Tijuana on August the 30th of 2021. Rivera had strangled and beaten to death another escort of whom he was a regular client. Days later, her body was found bundled in a trash bin. Roughly 3 weeks after Flores was found dead, 25-year-old Elizabeth Martinez Cigarroa went on a Valentine's Day date with an American believed to have been Rivera, whom she'd met at the Hong Kong club. Her body, which exhibited obvious signs of violence, was discovered in her abandoned truck on February the 17th. Baja California authorities compared Rivera to notorious American serial killer Ted Bundy, noting he displayed similar violent and psychopathic behavior. According to updates from mid-August of 2023, Rivera was investigated in connection to a 4th killing, which had occurred in similar circumstances to the previous 3 to which he was tied. Number 8. Pramila Lal. On September the 6th of 2013, a teenager from Colorado was accidentally shot dead by a man who was house-sitting for her family. 18-year-old Pramila Lal's family had moved, and friend Nerek Gali, aged 21, was keeping an eye on the recently vacated home. At the time, he was playing video games with Lal's 15-year-old brother, Pranil. Just before 8 p.m., Lal and her 12-year-old cousin decided to sneak inside the house and surprise them. Gali heard noises in the home and grabbed his gun, also providing a firearm to Pranil. They went to investigate the source of the commotion. The pair believed that an intruder had broken in, presumably after learning that the home was empty. They passed by a closet, at which point Lal jumped out and screamed. She'd meant it as a harmless prank, but Gali was startled and pulled the trigger. Lal was shot, and the others rushed her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead about an hour later. The authorities took testimonies from all those involved, concluding that the reports were consistent with an accidental shooting. Gali had a license to carry, and Lal's family knew he was armed. He wasn't charged with her death, but instead was held on charges of reckless endangerment, child abuse, and providing a gun to a juvenile, stemming from him giving Lal's brother a weapon. Number 7. Fireball at birthday party. In April of 2018, a video of a surprise birthday party gone horrifically wrong at an Indian home started circulating online. The teenager that was being celebrated, surrounded by hydrogen-filled balloons, ignited a candle on her cake, with the tall flame reaching up to one of the balloons. It exploded, causing a chain reaction in which the others caught fire virtually at the same time. The camera's operator recorded from afar as the teen was engulfed by the flames of a massive fireball. The birthday girl was then briefly captured running and screaming towards the camera, with her arms flailing in the air. In subsequent posts, the teenager was revealed to have suffered severe burns across her arms. Because the gas is so flammable, a number of countries have outlawed the use of hydrogen balloons, including the UK. Hydrogen infamously led to the 1937 Hindenburg disaster, in which it ignited and destroyed the airship in under a minute, causing the death of 35 people. The dangers of hydrogen-filled balloons were reflected by another serious incident that occurred in September of 2020 in India, during a birthday party gathering in Chennai, honoring the 70th birthday of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The organizers had planned a surprise release of up to 2,000 balloons. As the preparations were being filmed, roughly 100 balloons were ignited by a firecracker spark. A giant fireball erupted, causing people to flee for their lives, several of them with their hair on fire. At least a dozen of those in attendance were reported to have been hurt in the flash blaze. Number 6. Christopher Bergen. 37-year-old Christopher Bergen arrived to Florida from Norway in the evening of October the 1st of 2019. From the airport, he went straight to the Gulf Breeze home of his father-in-law, Richard Dennis, to surprise him for his 61st birthday. Unbeknownst to Bergen, earlier in the evening, his spouse's father had gotten into an argument with another relative who'd loudly banged on his front door. Dennis went outside and ran that person off, but about 2 hours later, at 11:30 p.m., heard the same type of banging at his back door. He turned on the back porch lights, and as he emerged from his residence with a .380 caliber semi-automatic firearm, heard growling in the bushes nearby. Moments later, Bergen jumped from the shadows, hoping to surprise Dennis. In doing so, he scared his father-in-law into releasing a round from his weapon that struck him in the chest. Upon realizing what had happened, Dennis immediately called 911, then grabbed some towels and fruitlessly tried to stop Bergen's bleeding. Unfortunately, he'd been shot in the heart and died on the spot. Santa Rosa County Sheriff Bob Johnson told the media that no charges were warranted in the case, as the shooting had been entirely accidental. Number 5. Steven Weber. On September the 19th of 2019, Steven Weber and his girlfriend, Kanisha Antoine, were at the Manta Resort, a luxury establishment found over 800 feet into the Indian Ocean off the shore of Tanzania's Pemba Island. The resort, anchored to the seafloor by cables, gave its guests a chance to spend time in underwater rooms with large windows that offered views of the marine life. While Antoine sat in one of the said rooms, she saw Weber swimming outside of it. The 40-year-old then pressed a handwritten note which had been placed in a plastic bag to the window. It read, "I can't hold my breath long enough to tell you everything I love about you, but everything I love about you, I love more every day." Weber then flipped the note to reveal a surprise marriage proposal. He then pulled out a jewelry box from his swim trunks and opened it to reveal a ring. In the video-recorded proposal, Weber then swam up out of frame, while Antoine headed to the resort's upper decks expecting to meet him. Unfortunately, the man never surfaced. His girlfriend tried to phone and radio for help but couldn't reach resort personnel. She eventually managed to flag down a passing boat and its occupants recovered Weber from the ocean. They performed CPR but were ultimately unable to revive him. Weber was described as a strong swimmer who'd gone snorkeling multiple times, and his family struggled to understand what had happened to him after he disappeared from Antoine's view. The leading theory was that after freediving an estimated 10 feet and presenting the surprise, he'd experienced a blackout from the lack of oxygen and drowned. Heartbroken, Antoine confirmed his demise in a Facebook post, also revealing that her answer to the proposal would have been 1,000,000 times yes. Number 4. Avalisa Morris. In February of 2011, Avalisa Morris, aged 26, had thrown a surprise birthday party for a friend at an Albany home in the Queensborough of New York City. The woman, originally from Westmoreland, Jamaica, had spent the entire day preparing traditional dishes for the friends and family expected at the event. Many of those invited worked together at a nearby shopping mall, and as reported by one attendee, none had known criminal connections. In the early hours of February the 7th, the boisterous atmosphere was interrupted as fighting erupted. O'Neill Mears, aged 23, had arrived at the party reportedly uninvited and slapped his girlfriend following an unspecified argument. He then started fighting with another man, named as Nicholas Allen. Morris intervened and threw both of them out of the party. Afterwards, she stood by the door to make sure they wouldn't return. They banged and pushed on the door but couldn't force their way back inside. It's believed that Mears and Allen had continued to brawl outside before 2 gunshots rang out. The rounds pierced through the door, striking Morris in the head and abdomen. Her sister found her lying on the floor just inside the doorway, unresponsive. She died at the scene. After being found guilty of manslaughter, Mears and Allen were sentenced to 15 years in prison in December of 2014. Number 3. Finksburg cake explosion. A girl in her early teens and her parents were injured following a low-level explosion in Carroll County, Maryland, in August of 2011. The incident occurred amidst a birthday party for the teenager at the family's Finksburg residence. As the surprise cake was brought out, someone had accidentally put fireworks on it, presumably having mistaken them for candles. The pyrotechnics exploded as soon as they were lit, with the blast affecting all 3 family members. They were taken to the hospital and later pronounced to be in good condition. Local authorities investigated the matter, but no foul play was suspected. Number 2. Bethany Lot. A surprise marriage proposal on a mountaintop in North Carolina ended in tragedy in June of 2010. The hike to Max Bald Patch, a 4,600-foot mountain on the Tennessee border, was one that 25-year-old Bethany Lot had been wanting to take ever since she'd first started dating Richard Butler, aged 30. The man knew that Lot wanted to get married on the mountain and had planned to propose to her once they reached a popular summit that offered stunning panoramic views of the surrounding landscape. They'd ignored electrical storm and rain warnings to make the climb. During the hike, before Butler could produce the ring, the couple was struck by lightning. Lot was a few feet in front of him on the incline and was hit first with the electrical arc, then jumping to Butler as well. By his account of the incident, he was spun around and thrown several feet back. He suffered third-degree burns, couldn't move his legs properly, and felt like his feet were on fire. Butler crawled to Lot, who was lying unresponsive on the ground. He performed CPR on her for 15 minutes and tried to phone for help, but the call wouldn't go through. Butler's legs were still too weak from the shock sustained in the lightning strike to carry his would-be fiancée down. He jumped in his vehicle and asked for help at the first driveway. Rescuers eventually made their way to her, but Lot couldn't be saved. The woman's last words to Butler reportedly had been, "Look how beautiful it is," and he placed a ring on her finger as the paramedics tried to revive her. Number 1. Evan Thomas Silver. In February of 2021, a man died following the explosion of a cannon-like contraption at a gender reveal party in Genesee County, Michigan. The deceased, Evan Thomas Silver, aged 26, was a friend of the expecting parents. The device, which the homeowner had purchased at an auction, was similar to a signal cannon and designed to create a big flash, loud noise and smoke without actually firing a projectile. It was meant as a surprise announcement of the baby's pending arrival. Silver was standing roughly 10 to 15 feet from it as the fuse was lit before the cannon then exploded, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. Metal fragments struck Silver in the chest, inflicting critical injuries. He was rushed to the Hurley Medical Center in Flint, where he was subsequently pronounced dead. As reported by explosive and firearms specialists, the blast could have resulted from the wear and tear of the cannon itself, but also from the wrong quantity or type of gunpowder used. It would have thus turned the contraption into a fragmentation bomb. No one else at the gender reveal party was hurt, but several cars were damaged by the metal shards. At about 7 p.m. on May the 15th of 2020, staff at the Westwood Nursing Center in Detroit, Michigan, heard a commotion in one of their patients' rooms. 75-year-old Norman Bledsoe, an Army veteran, was found to be bleeding. Having sustained severe injuries on both sides of his head, he was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was stabilized. Bledsoe's roommate at the time was 20-year-old Jaden T. Hayden, who suffered from schizophrenia. As his mental state was worsening, he'd recently been moved from a group home to the mental health ward of a local hospital. After catching COVID, Hayden was moved to Westwood Nursing Center while he recovered. When questioned about Bledsoe, he initially told employees that the elderly man had gotten injured by falling out of bed. However, it was later discovered that the young man had filmed himself attacking Bledsoe, then uploaded the footage on social media. He also allegedly stole the victim's bank cards. After the videos were viewed by the Ann Arbor Police Department, Hayden was arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of assault with intent to do great bodily harm, larceny in a building, and 2 counts of stealing or retaining a financial transaction device without consent. 2 months after the incident, Bledsoe passed away at a different nursing home. Although his death wasn't ruled a homicide, his family indicated that he was never the same after the attack. In April of 2022, the case against Hayden was dropped after he was declared incompetent to stand trial. As of the latest developments, the young man was being treated at the Kalamazoo Psychiatric Hospital. Number 6. Yulia Storozhuk. 29-year-old Yulia Storozhuk from Sunny Isles Beach, Florida, was caught by a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera abusing her young son. On the evening of October the 31st of 2023, law enforcement received a call about the situation, and officers were dispatched to the apartment building in the 17,000 block of North Bay Road. The neighbor gave police the alarming video footage they captured, which showed Storozhuk pushing the child to the ground and kicking them. She then held the boy to the ground as he tried to stand back up. In a second clip, the woman was shown shoving her son in the chest, knocking him over. While speaking with investigators, Storozhuk claimed that she'd pushed the boy because he wanted to go to the playground and was being uncooperative with her. When an officer spoke to the boy himself, he had visible bruises on his cheek, arm, and knee. During a subsequent court hearing, Storozhuk stated through a Russian translator that she and her son had fled the war in Ukraine the previous year, eventually landing in South Florida, where she started working as a flight attendant. She maintained that she didn't abuse her son and that she'd only allowed her anger to get the better of her one time. Nevertheless, she was ordered to have no contact with the child while being held in custody on a $5,000 bond. Number 5. Robert Edward Moore. On June the 28th of 2023, an elderly man was beaten to death following an altercation at the Glenview Country Club in the Villages, Florida. 87-year-old Dean William Zook was involved in a minor fender bender in which he accidentally hit someone's parked car. He was confronted by Robert Edward Moore, aged 76, who thought it was his vehicle that Zook made contact with. The latter offered to exchange insurance information with Moore, who proceeded to punch the elderly man in the head with a closed fist. Shortly thereafter, Moore realized that Zook hadn't in fact hit his car, so he left the scene. Meanwhile, the victim became unsteady after absorbing the blow and eventually started slurring his words. After being taken to a hospital, Zook learned that his brain was bleeding as a result of the punch thrown by Moore. A couple of weeks later, Zook succumbed to his injuries a day before his 88th birthday. Investigators were able to identify Moore as the perpetrator after seeing an article written about him scoring a hole-in-one the previous year. In pictures taken for the article, the man was wearing the exact same shorts, shoes, and sunglasses as he was during his altercation with Zook. Moore told police that he thought the older man was attempting to flee the scene of an accident and was unaware of the victim's age before striking him. He was arrested on a charge of aggravated manslaughter on an elderly person. He was held at the Sumter County Detention Center on a $30,000 bond. Number 4. Agnieszka Kalinowska and Andrzej Lataszewski. In October of 2020, teenager Sebastian Kalinowski moved from Poland to live with his mother, Agnieszka Kalinowska, in West Yorkshire, England. In the months that followed, Kalinowska and her living partner, Andrzej Lataszewski, began to regard the teen as something of a hindrance. According to prosecutor Jason Pitter, KC, the couple started bullying and abusing Sebastian on a regular basis, inflicting physical punishments that were increasingly more severe and violent over time. As stated by Pitter, on August the 13th of 2021, less than a year after Sebastian's relocation from Poland, he was found in dire medical condition at his mother's Huddersfield home. Kalinowska and her partner had installed CCTV cameras around the house in order to keep an eye on Sebastian even when they were away. Authorities seized surveillance footage which showed Lataszewski dragging the teen naked, clearly wet and unconscious from his bedroom on the day in question. The cumulative effect of the routine beatings that Sebastian had suffered ultimately proved too much for him, and he died of an infection caused by untreated complications of multiple rib fractures. During their prolonged reign of terror over the victim, Kalinowska and Lataszewski reportedly beat him with a wooden plank, whipped him with extension cords, and stabbed him in the groin with a needle. They also verbally berated him and forced him to perform humiliating exercise drills. It took more than 2.5 hours after Sebastian lost consciousness for the emergency services to be called, likely contributing to his death. Both of the teen's guardians were arrested on murder charges, of which they were found guilty in July of 2022. A West Yorkshire police official called it the most harrowing, tragic and heartbreaking case of his multi-decade career. In the end, both defendants were sentenced to life in prison with minimum terms of 39 years. Number 3. Steve Stevens. Ohio man Robert Lee Godwin Sr. was walking around the streets of Cleveland's Glenville neighborhood on the afternoon of April the 16th of 2017. It was Easter Sunday, and the 74-year-old was carrying a bag to collect any littered cans that he could find. As Godwin was walking near the 600 block of East 93rd Street, another man exited a car and approached him. The stranger asked Godwin to say the name Joy Lane, who was apparently the man's girlfriend of about 3 years, but Godwin didn't know her. Nevertheless, the man stated, "She's the reason why this is about to happen to you," before gunning the elderly man down. Police identified the shooter as 37-year-old Steve Stevens. The latter had used his cell phone to film the incident in its entirety, including his exchange with Godwin. Stevens uploaded the video to his Facebook profile, and a manhunt was launched shortly thereafter. authorities offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to Stevens' capture. Federal agents aided the Cleveland Police Department during the search, which expanded to include the states of Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, and Michigan on the second day. Then on April the 18th, 2 days after the shooting, an employee at a McDonald's in Harbor Creek Township, Pennsylvania, recognized Stevens in the drive-through line. The worker attempted to stall the fugitive while others notified law enforcement, telling him that his French fries were still being made. However, the man eventually grew wise to the employee's scheme and left the restaurant without his fries. The police gave chase, pursuing him through Wesleyville before successfully executing a pit maneuver in the city of Erie. Officers closed in on Stevens' disabled vehicle, but by the time they reached him, he'd already succumbed to a gunshot wound to the head. Prior to his death, Stevens claimed responsibility for upwards of 13 murders on Facebook, though no victims other than Godwin were ever confirmed. Investigators determined that the elderly man had been chosen at random by Stevens, who told his mother he was shooting people because he was mad with his girlfriend. A portion of East 146th Street in Cleveland was renamed Robert Godwin Sr. Way in his honor. Today's topic was requested by Lauren Jason. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Toni Kojakaru. In March of 2016, a video surfaced online in which a bearded man was shown viciously beating a defenseless teenager in what appeared to be someone's living room. The clip quickly captured the internet's attention, amassing millions of views in a matter of days. Thanks in part to the video's sweeping popularity, police were able to identify the assailant as MMA fighter Toni Kojakaru. The 26-year-old from National Park, New Jersey, was arrested on charges of aggravated assault and making threats. Throughout the viral clip, Kojakaru could be heard taunting the 17-year-old victim, threatening to kill him if he called the police. The teen cowered helplessly on the couch as Kojakaru delivered blow after blow, at one point kicking the boy in the face multiple times. It wasn't clear what triggered the beatdown, nor was the victim identified, though law enforcement revealed that he wasn't related to Kojakaru. The latter was released after posting his $50,000 bail. His attorney stated that the incident stemmed from a disagreement during a 3 a.m. party. He also described his client as a fitness enthusiast rather than an MMA fighter, while claiming that Kojakaru was very remorseful for his actions. For those of you who couldn't get enough of this video, wait till you see what happens when bad luck strikes in, when factories go wrong. Coming right up after number 1. Number 1. Boston ATV attack. 82-year-old Richard Bell left his home in Brookline, Massachusetts, to pick up a Thanksgiving turkey on the evening of November the 18th of 2021. As he turned onto Boylston Street near Fenway Park in Boston, dozens of off-road motorcycles and ATVs suddenly started approaching his vehicle. The group, composed of about 30 to 40 riders, proceeded to attack the defenseless man, shattering his car windows with pipes and large rocks. Bell managed to drive away but was pursued by some of the riders. They started kicking and striking Bell's car as he tried to drive evasively to get away. The victim eventually got stuck at the top of the Cambridge Street off-ramp in Allston, where he'd attempted to wave down another vehicle for help. One of the riders started hitting him through an open car window before he finally managed to escape. Bell pulled into a nearby gas station and collapsed to the ground, at which point the emergency services were called. He was taken to St. Elizabeth's Medical Center, where he remained for several days thereafter. Law enforcement called on the public for help in catching Bell's attackers, but despite security camera footage of the group, no suspects were identified. The victim's vehicle was totaled in the onslaught, but fortunately, his serious injuries eventually healed and he was released to his family. Number 9. Luana D'Orazio. Nationwide calls for better workplace safety, both from the public and competent authorities, were issued throughout Italy in 2021 following the death of a worker at a textile factory in Prato, Tuscany province. 22-year-old Luana D'Orazio had been employed at the factory for about a year. On May the 3rd, she was stationed at a warper, an industrial machine that features large roll-in bars, which sort out threads. Dorazio's shirt was caught by the machine and she was pulled inside. It only took about 7 seconds, according to subsequent reports, for an employee to activate an emergency stop. By then, however, the mother of one's body had already been turned and compressed twice by the warper's deadly embrace, as stated by a technical consultant assigned to the case. Dorazio's chest was crushed and she passed away in the aftermath. The investigation into her death was closed in October of 2021, and it found that the factory's management had prioritized revenue over employee safety. A protective gate valve had been removed, causing the roll-in bar that hooked Dorazio to protrude more than it should have. By eliminating the warper's safety feature, the factory would have allegedly seen an increase of at least 8% in productivity. Luana Copini, the company's owner, along with her husband, reported as the plant's de facto administrator, and the maintenance technician who'd materially tampered with the machine, all faced manslaughter charges. Dorazio's passing caused a considerable degree of public outrage, in the midst of which street artist Iori created a mural in Rome meant to honor her memory while also raising awareness about companies that put profit before the lives of workers. Number 8. Laila El Harim. A mother of one perished in gruesome circumstances at an Italian sweet packaging factory in August of 2021 after she was dragged into one of the industrial machines that she'd been operating. 40-year-old Laila El Harim, originally from Morocco, had lived in Italy for over 2 decades. She'd recently started working for Bombonette, a company specializing in food packaging products, and was thrilled about the position as the factory was only 10 minutes from her home in the town of Bastiglia. At the start of her shift on August the 3rd, she was working at a die cutter, a large machine used to shape packaging material. It reportedly featured a double mechanical operating block that could only be handled manually. Details of what followed weren't released, pending the conclusion of an official investigation, but at some point, El Harim was caught in the cutting machine. Colleagues alerted the police and medical services arrived at the scene, but there was nothing more to be done for El Harim, as she'd already been crushed to death. An update on the inquiry in progress indicated that the victim hadn't been trained to operate the machine to which she'd been assigned, which would make Bombonette susceptible to manslaughter charges. Number 7. Jill Greninger. On April the 22nd of 2019, a woman died at a factory in Pennsylvania after falling into a commercial-grade meat grinder. 35-year-old Jill Greninger was an employee at Economy Locker Storage Company in Pennsport and was operating the machine at around 11:40 a.m. None of her fellow employees witnessed the incident as it unfolded, but one did report hearing a noise before finding Greninger's body inside the grinder. She had suffered life-ending injuries inflicted by the machine, which was specifically designed for tearing apart meat. It took 45 minutes for staff to disassemble it and recover the woman's remains. The overall context of the incident remained unclear, but the Lycoming County coroner reported that Greninger had been standing on a set of wheeled stairs at the time. It was presumed that she'd somehow lost her balance and tumbled inside the grinder. The coroner declared her death to have been a horrible accident, but an investigation from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration subsequently found at least 11 serious safety violations at the meat processing business. In October of that same year, Economy Locker Storage Company was fined close to $50,000. Number 6. Regina Allen Elsey. In June of 2016, an Alabama factory worker was crushed to death in an incident that involved an industrial robotic arm. It occurred at an Agin USA plant in Cosita, which employed a staff of several hundred that primarily dealt with stamping metal parts for Hyundai and Kia vehicles. During an assembly line stoppage, 20-year-old Regina Allen Elsey entered a robotics station to clear a sensor fault. The line was restarted abruptly while the young woman was still servicing the station, and she was crushed inside. Elsey suffered devastating injuries to which she succumbed on June the 19th, roughly 2 weeks before her wedding day. Several authoritative branches, including the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, investigated the incident. Agin would ultimately plead guilty to breaking the federal standard that required the use of safety protocols, known as lockout-tagout procedures, aimed at preventing the sudden machine startup that had resulted in Elsie's death. In November of 2020, a judge ordered the auto parts manufacturer to pay a fine of $500,000 and $1 million to the deceased worker's estate. Number 5. David Spano. A Michigan worker was fatally crushed by multiple tons of materials in November of 2020 at a factory in Romeo. 44-year-old David Spano was employed by Romeo Rim Inc., a company specialized in making automotive parts, at its main plant. He died after roughly 25,000 pounds of manufacturing mold, primarily used for the production of bus bumpers, collapsed on top of him from one of the factory's interior walls. Spano died instantly under the 12.5-ton weight of the mold, in an impact comparable to that of a cruise ship anchor being dropped on top of his body. It was initially reported as an accident, but an investigation was launched. It was unclear, however, in its early stages if Spano had received the proper training in recognizing hazardous situations at the plant. Number 4. Martin Perriello. On February the 20th of 2008, a Czech national suffered a painful death in a workplace accident at Britain's largest confectionery firm. Martin Perriello had climbed into a jelly bean machine at a plant operated by Tangerine Confectionery to investigate a blockage involving sweet trays. The starch room operator had limited apprehension of English and was believed to have misunderstood or misheard an instruction to switch off and isolate the device prior to servicing it. The machine then abruptly restarted, trapping Perriello inside, and his body was slowly compressed as 2 heavy rotary arms sprang into action. A fellow employee tried to turn the machine off but unwittingly pressed the wrong button. Other employees alerted the emergency services and attempted to manually extract Perriello, who was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene. An inquest into the incident found that the Tangerine Confectionery hadn't had proper safety protocols in place when it came to assigning staff to investigate and clear blockages. The Bournemouth Crown Court was also told that the machine was prone to blockages and would go through up to 40 of them in one shift. The firm was fined the equivalent of $400,000 in the aftermath. Number 3. Matthew Lowe. Shortly before Christmas in 2008, a plate welder sustained devastating injuries at a Compass engineering factory in Bark, England. Father of one, Matthew Lowe, was operating a computer-controlled conveyor belt which processed steel beams. At some point during the workday, Lowe's overalls got caught in the machinery and he was forcefully pulled backwards. Lowe's entire body, with the exception of his head, was then pushed sideways through a 5-inch gap. Looking back on the horrific accident, Lowe remembered that he relaxed and hoped for the best, knowing he'd be powerless to oppose the machine. His body was mangled and his clothes were ripped apart as the conveyor belt processed him and then spat him out the other end. He was alone in that part of the factory at the time and was found after 2 workmen heard his pain-induced screams. Lowe was rushed to the hospital where his partner, 29-year-old teaching assistant Kim Swift, was told to expect the worst. The man's face was purple and the whites of his eyes were red due to the immense pressure to which he'd been subjected. Swift recounted that he was alert but didn't know he'd been dragged into the machine and forced through a space that was only about twice the size of a golf tee. The 25-year-old had suffered a ruptured stomach and bowel, a shattered pelvis, as well as broken ribs and a fractured arm. Lowe underwent 6 surgeries involving numerous metal pins used to piece his body back together. He experienced a remarkable recovery but still suffered from panic attacks in the period following the accident. After about 18 months, he returned to Compass Engineering and began training for a supervisor position. Number 2. Zhou. In December of 2018, a Chinese factory worker was skewered with multiple steel rods after a robotic arm collapsed on top of him. The incident took place at a porcelain plant in Zhuzhou in southern China's Henan province. The 49-year-old victim, only identified as Zhou, was left in critical condition after the machinery had impaled him with its steel pins. His colleagues took him to a local emergency room and he was subsequently transferred to Xianjia Hospital in the provincial capital. Zhou survived but was left with 10 metal spikes embedded in various areas of his body. They were sharp-pointed and each about a foot long and over half an inch in diameter. 8 of them had speared through Zhou's right arm and forearm, several breaking through to the other side. One spike had impaled his shoulder while another was lodged in his chest. Because the pieces were long and made of metal, Zhou couldn't be given an X-ray. He was also unable to lie down and had to lean on the assistance of nearly a dozen doctors and nurses. The day after the gruesome accident, Zhou underwent an emergency operation involving specialists from multiple hospital departments. They were successful in extracting the spikes and the worker began to recover. Zhou was extremely fortunate to have survived the accident as the rod in his chest had missed a major artery by only 0.04 inches. Number 1. Juma Junko. An accident at a sausage factory in Iloilo City in the Philippines claimed the life of a teenage worker in June of 2019. Juma Junko, aged 18, had been employed at the factory for about 2 weeks, and his job was to package finished products. Junko was assisting his more experienced colleague, Carl David Carlos, who was working with a meat mixer. The latter stepped away for a moment, at which point Junko tried to operate the machine alone, even though he hadn't been trained to do so. The teenager got his arm caught in the mechanism, which rapidly pulled him in headfirst. Carlos returned to find Junko's legs sticking out of the meat mixer. He tried turning it off, but the teenager was already beyond saving. Police were called to the factory, and they removed his body from the machine, which had either experienced a blockage or the activation of a failsafe, as Junko's remains were largely intact. A funeral director later told a media outlet that Junko had likely died of suffocation instead of blunt force trauma. A police investigation was launched, but foul play wasn't suspected, with the accident being attributed to Junko's ill-fated decision to operate the mixer without supervision. Thanks for watching.